I figured you were going there, so I moved.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hello. Oh, there you go. So yeah, it's working.
So there's. Yes. I would have to get in contact with them. Just looking for the site. Yeah, hope that that's right. Yeah. That's the word is that the money is.
There's chairs in here. That's where we go. Guess this is where we go. I'm trying to figure out where my best bet is to get so I can get up and. That's easiest for me to get up. Somebody sitting on the chair in front of me. Where we're supposed to sit, I'm guessing here.
That'd be my guess. I'd like to have the engineers explain to me what the hell they're doing.
You know, every time they asked anybody else, they told you something different.
Oh, yeah.
They never, and I could,
I don't think really it's masculine.
no, I could fly. If they wouldn't have put that verb in there, that pissed me off.
And they're so stupid,
Yeah.
you know? Well, in fact, it's good for us.
That won't be
If we
easy.
get that 4-inch rain like we had a couple of years ago, we'd be flooded.
Yeah, because we don't have any place for ours to go.
Well, and then see,
So
when they
last
put
time
that
we were
in,
using the.
instead of putting storm sewers in, city storm sewers,
So
they're
this
running
is
everything
still
back to us instead of using storm sewers. And we were doing it. They're saying, hey, we'll just put that
Yeah.
that runoff to you folks, you deal with it. And you deal with the mosquitoes and the smell.
that, when they have that, when they bought that land there and all that stuff, they knew they couldn't put storm sewers in there because they had creeks run on both sides of it. How could they?
They still,
Where would they put a storm sewer?
they still, yeah, they still could. But they never put any storm sewers in on the Burns. Or they, yeah, they did, the Burns Lake. You one of the council.
No, I am not.
Oh,
I'm a clerk. I'm the city clerk.
you're a clerk.
Yeah.
You want to sit toward the front? Ask them. Do we need to sign in
At
anywhere?
least we could go sit outside without it. So,
And do we need to sign in anywhere to speak?
He'll have a sign-in up there
Oh, sure.
when he gets here.
Okay,
Something like
thank you. Hey.
You got to sign something. to let
Hey, how you
us know.
doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Well, I'm here.
All right, good deal. Glad you're here.
I sat out there.
You're gonna be able to get up there.
Can I get up there?
Yeah.
My
Whatever we
my
gotta
wife
do.
told me to get up there. Let's put it that way.
Hang on a second. Here. Then we gotta come back.
I wonder if any of the engineers are gonna be here. I'd sure like it.
You and I could have done that for a lot cheaper. than what it cost them.
A lot smarter, I'll tell you that.
Okay, I thought I should have started everything. Some of them.
You know, when they had that stuff behind us the way it was, you know, they only moved, but they went once a month. We did this time after.
Was Marina,
That's
Marina
something.
called me, come,
Yeah,
that's because she was more.
yeah. So that's what I was. Then if you,
We
then
gotta
if
sign
they
in.
go weed eat that. all the
I don't
grass
see
will
it.
go
I
in
have
our
it. That's not
yard.
it. I don't see it. So,
We could just put that back 10 feet easy.
Hey, there's our-
It's a rough group.
it's a rough.
Hey,
Can't wait to hear what they got to talk about.
hey Jerry, tell him what you did the other night.
Oh, I shot a 43.
You did.
Play with Norm every time.
You oughta see him.
He shot a 43.
Yeah, you shot a
So I
43.
asked him, I did.
Yeah, you oughta see him.
Which hole did you count?
Huh?
Which hole did you
I
count?
counted them all.
You oughta see
I
him.
even double counted them 2 or 3 times because I couldn't believe
He was
it.
nothing, he had nothing but a show.
Gee whiz, I ain't kidding you. He missed shots. Well, I asked the guy I was playing, keeping our score, and I said, well, I get under 60. He goes, yeah, you shot a 53. And I said, 53? There's no way. I had 50."
Here's some pictures I took. I didn't send them all to him, get them printed. These are some of the, and now those are the ones we're gonna enter into.
Okay. Yeah, these are excellent because I'm going to talk about that. Have to be done if they haven't come
See, and
down.
that's the culvert to the south.
Uh-huh. And there is no culvert to the north, which there's supposed to be.
Well, how could, where would you drain the water to? You can't run it uphill to the creek. The creek would run it back to
Can't
you.
even open the gate.
Yeah.
The creek would run it back to you.
That's what we could get that in ground thing and pump it over the top of the next.
It's the most
Oh.
ridiculous
See, that's mine.
fiasco I've ever
You gotta
seen.
get
Well, you
them
know,
on
if
here.
if you're on any kind of-
So do you know where your
I don't
property
know,
line
is that a
actually is?
floodplain over that?
The fence is.
But
It is now.
Yeah,
the problem was-
but if you're out in any kind of floodplain and they start putting up
Yeah.
dikes that would
Instead,
harm another person. That's
Yeah.
illegal.
And I
You
had-
can't do
that's
that.
right.
You
That's
can't
what
do
they
I
that.
had people saying that was
And if you're
appropriate.
putting up, if
Like
you're
they
in town and you wanted to put up a structure
And I asked
or a
Brad today, I
berm, so
said,
to speak, in your
Isn't
yard,
there-
you couldn't put it right on that
Absolutely.
property line.
He
You'd
said
have to move it
thought so.
over.
He
You
wasn't
couldn't put it on
100%
that.
sure. In most situations, there is.
What's that?
You know, not on mine, I have a fence up also, and there's like this much
That's not cool.
Yeah,
between the berm and my fence,
Yeah.
and you can't
yeah,
without falling over.
right,
She
right.
just put her
And
fence
I did
in
it
two
to
a year ago, this all started, and she put a fence in, so the dirt's up here, her fence is down here, and when that starts sloping, you know what's gonna be.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I love the way they hook that berm up now. And that way, for drainage, you just come right through our house.
Yeah,
And we can open the other
it's
door.
great.
and it'll go
Yeah,
this
let
way.
it go right straight through.
Maybe that's their.
There you go.
Not good.
Yeah. I'd like to talk.
I thought it was gonna have lakefront property, and now I gotta find some stupid.
I talked to one engineer when it started.
I think I got it on Friday, maybe. It was brought in, yeah.
The water will not go down, not in that soil we've got.
Right.
And he almost, oh yeah, I didn't know what I was talking about. Oh yeah, he was real smart. Yeah.
So that's when I received that package.
And then they put their.
That's when I received that. I don't know when the request came in.
The berm, about that.
No, that's, oh, you know, all they did by showing it clear over against your back fences.
And
I mean, a few feet on the other. And I
so
was talking to Brad Yeager on the phone earlier. It was a lot on the other side of that line. They have to be empty for now, but someday if they sell them. They're like 250 lines. What difference would it make? They cut it 20 foot off.
no.
Shut that whole pond over away from your back.
It just,
Can I go up and down?
It was, you know, I swear.
it's just a fiasco.
I really think a big part. When we started arguing about the not having proper drainage figured into that. With this rain, this was so bad. We spent the whole last year just trying to do anything that could.
He said it's down.
I really did. Yeah.
If they were all tied up, it's recent.
Yeah, sure.
If you put all concrete, oh.
Yeah. That is what it is. At least we're trying to make it reasonable.
Maybe if we get all the pipes through there, it's gonna say it's- If it's gonna bring hardwood to get deep enough. What is our side?
They said we can.
Yeah, we
You know, and yeah, the drainage pipes, that's one of the
Then
things
the
I got in my
administrator will
comments.
show them that.
Newton told us for a case, we would have drainage pipes. And several people told me they talked to the contractors and they're working with them. So how you gonna go under our dock? Oh, we're gonna put drain pipes in. There's none there.
Oh, right now?
Yeah.
If they would have
Huh?
one east side, if they had a couple of for an overflow,
Yeah.
then the city,
Jim, do you want me, when they put this form out that we signed, so to speak, do you want me to sign it? For them? Otherwise, you gotta get up there and,
I gotta get up there or right here.
well, you gotta.
You're
you have
you're
to go
top,
up
but if
there
you
and-
wanna sign in, you gotta clear up there. So Elaine can sign you in.
Sure.
You wanna go first?
Where I was.
Yes.
That way you guys will have problems. I'll take care of it.
You like.
Okay, I'll take care of
Hey,
it.
I'll let you-
I'm not gonna say what my
Hey, I
wife
want
said,
you-
but you can't
if I
even.
invite the council, they can park at my place and come to my yard and take a good look at the asphalt. You know,
Did you understand that?
There's nothing up there
There
yet to
was no
sign.
sign. They don't have it out yet.
Yeah, long night.
I'm not even drinking beer.
They can do
Yeah,
that.
no, it wouldn't be bad if we could sit here
You're
now.
right.
You know,
I'd come on one of these.
antibiotics. They drive my insides. I think I'm allergic.
Sally's living here. Where we saw,
Yeah, Norm, I'm sure, I guarantee you saw the best game of my year.
Watch that.
You played very well.
And.
You know, it's just, when you just don't do dumb things and make dumb mistakes, it goes pretty easy.
You don't get that rope funny when you're on, when you're not. No matter what you try, it don't work.
Yeah, I hadn't been under 50 yet this year, and I was shooting 43.
Yeah.
As a kid, like, who the heck was I playing?
I don't think that's why we had it.
I can't remember who I was playing, but he was giving me 4 or 5 strokes. So I think I beat him.
One bad thing.
I know, it runs my hand, yeah. I think I gotta go play this week. I'm falling now.
You suppose you could call you saying that?
Probably.
Got it figured out.
All right.
All right.
Bump us in the
I
first
felt that. I
place.
thought,
Yeah, if I'm stuck somewhere or what.
you find those out?
I want to be in first place for a week.
Our goal is to stay out of last.
How was your trip?
We've ended up last two years.
I think Corey's team is gonna run it.
Oh, yeah.
Well, they all skipped the first week because they said it was too cold.
Oh,
And a couple of them are gonna be gone sometime in June. Because they're going out west coast and they don't think they can find 4 to play. So they're probably gonna come before it again. So I think they're gonna be very
No, that's
because
fine.
of the early season work.
Are you gonna talk?
how you doing?
Well, I'm here. Welcome to the club.
So they'll tell us when they have to sign in then.
Yeah. That's what they did last time.
All right. Edie's golfing tonight.
Yeah.
So did she play a volleyball now?
Yeah.
She did play a whitetail, right?
She played both.
Okay.
So now they're all up. We're lucky. She is a girl. She can't throw the jail.
It's all right. Could make pretty good friends. Or all day, her backyard's being destroyed by the city, and they throw her out of the council meeting. That'd be great.
Hey.
Jerry, what are you here for?
Keep an eye on you.
One isn't enough.
One's not enough. Oh, we got some issues with the development.
Next door.
Yeah, yeah. What about you? What are you up to?
Used to be my neighbor. Well, that's your brother.
Okay.
All right.
Water issue there.
Yeah. They forget this town sits low. Owners don't gotta go somewhere when you build anything.
Well, they don't clean
Well, it
out,
won't, where we live, it won't go down.
No.
because they don't clean out the ditches, so
Oh,
try to go in.
let's not even go there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that creek to the north of us is gonna clean everything out. The city said it's not ours.
County said.
County says it's not theirs, so we just all look at it.
It don't exist. Don't belong.
And
to
we just
anybody.
ignore it.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know why they don't clean it wrong right now. They say they can't because too much of it's running through the middle of blocks with private property on both sides. Well, they go on private property anytime they want to. They've dug holes in my backyard a half a dozen times since I lived there.
You know, I was talking to their engineer about when this gas when they're putting in.
Yeah.
We had a few words. He said, well, I inform you right now, that's city property, not yours.
Yeah.
And that's where he put it. And I I think I told him, I wondered if he got his education in Braden or Rising City. I told him, I said, "Good waters." He looked at me, yeah, he looked at me, tell me.
Down, that's this monkey old combo.
Well, and we're gonna run it to the north. So he's like, "We'll try to run water up. And if we try to run it in the creek, it's gonna come back.
Did they tell you once that they dug all that out so they can put fill over there so they can build drains? Then they're gonna fill this back in with
Well, that was told me at one time.
topsoil, so
But
that
that's
water.
boy, that changed.
Yeah, that's what they told me. That's crazy.
Oh, it's just crazy. What they did was they got destroyed the value of our property.
You're up there, you think that they're faking this bird flu for the price of meat? That's all right. Can't you still eat that bird? Or they just wouldn't like it? They kept it so long. I think it's because they're spraying to kill all the birds. I think you can still eat the bird.
Yeah,
You have to sign in to talk.
I don't think you're gonna need to talk the way about
They make me first, that's, can the city afford to have everybody on the west
Just
side of the
invite them to come to my property. That's cool.
$29.51, right?
Yes,
You're number 3.
number 3.
You never, you placed. No, you can show.
Spectators tonight. Maybe it'll go fast.
You're a week ago, it's amazing.
Why would you do that?
Well, I tripped with the other foot. I put this one out to stop me. Banging it on.
Can't complain, I got up this morning. Good start to the day.
A week, I was on the second day, I'm up and talking. Boy, really?
Hey,
Still kicking. Not very high. Kind of like the old roosters. Got a lot of scratching, but not racing much.
Okay, good evening, everyone. The time is 6:31. Go ahead and open up public comment. So this gives any member of the public an opportunity to speak on any item that's not on the agenda. Okay, looks like we have a pretty full list. So you have up to 5 minutes, and this will go until 7 o'clock. There's also comment cards in the back next to Jeremy over there in IT. So we'll go ahead and start it off. Elaine Evans, if you want to state your name and address, that would be great.
Okay, my name is Elaine Evans. I live at 2741 Laverna, and I am here again, same as the last 2 months. I've asked each of you to please come and view the debacle or detention cell to the west of Laverna Street. Mayor Spellerberg and Bradley Yerger have visited, as had the civil engineer. They all concur with the residents' assessment. However, we have yet to see work continue to reach mutually pleasing solution. As civil servants for the city of Fremont, I ask, what is holding each of you back? Is it the old, it's not in my ward, but it's your city and you owe it to each individual that resides here in Fremont. I realize too that you can't please everyone. Whatever happens to the detention pond will far outlive us, so it must be done correctly. Do you know what happens to soil that has no drainage? It starts to smell like a sewer, or as my mom used to call it, sour. Well, that is what we had prior to yesterday's wind. With stagnant water will come mosquitoes and possibly snakes. The culverts have been placed higher than the bottom of the cell, creating quite a problem. We were told drainage pipes were to be installed, but that hasn't been done as promised. I am imploring each of you, please come and view what we look at every day. Sunday, I visited with neighbors on the west side of Laverna Street. Many expressed concern about the weed problem on the dike, as we call it. Today, a city employee did mow the top, but what about the weeds on the side of the berm? Thank you for your attention.
Cindy Berry.
Hello, my name is Cindy Berry. I live in Central Park Edition at 2753 Laverna Street. I bought my home there a year ago. It's a lovely home and I had a beautiful field behind me to the west. Now I have a huge drainage ditch, retention pond, whatever you want to call it. It's very unsightly. The east side of the berm that runs behind all of our houses on Laverna Street is very high. I've had trucks driving on that berm, and as I'm sitting in my TV room, they wave at me. It's very unsightly. It runs right up next to my fence. I can't even walk between the berm and the fence. It's like 6 inches. There's weeds growing on it now. Who's going to take care of the weeds? There's all kinds of fabric that they had put up along the berm, and that has now fallen down. It's covered with dirt. It looks so awful out there, and we take great pride in our homes, and I feel like we are being neglected because we have had people out there looking at this, and we thank them for that, but nothing has been done. And when I moved here a year ago, I paid a good amount for my townhome, and almost immediately the valuation went down. And now I know why. So I just really feel that I would like someone to come out and look at our dilemma, because I just finished my basement also. If I get water in my basement, who am I going to go to? I feel like it's going to be the city of Fremont. Thank you.
Jim Brown.
My name's Jim Brown and I live at 2951 North Laverna, and my house, the berm is in the back. And I can't understand why they put it right up on the property line. If you was to have anything done in the city and you wanted to put something up, say a berm or something in your yard, you would have had to pick it back from that property line. They wouldn't have allowed you to have something right on that property line. That makes a big difference, because more yard that there is behind, the less chance you have of that berm stopping the water that comes off of our homes. And like the previous lady said, they went by and mowed the top of that thing today, but the side had weeds a foot long, but it's still there. So that's not the way it should be. But every time we've asked anything, each person gets a different answer. So I'm not sure that you guys knew what was going on out there and if anybody had ever went out there to look and see what was going on. But we're just letting you know that we don't like it very well.
Jerry Delaney.
Good evening. I'm Jerry Delaney. I live at 2940 Laverna. Some of this is going to be repetitive of what you've already heard, and we'll probably hear some more because I'd like to address some issues affecting 27 homes that are located on the west side of Laverna Street between 27th and 32nd Street. The berm that makes up the east edge of the Tech Park retention pond is butted right up to the property line of the 27 homes that exist next to it. As Jim just stated, there is no spacing that is typically required. If there are any easements, as there is everywhere else in the city, they've been ignored. And when any individual or developer builds in this town, they're required to maintain set easement spacings from the edge of the property line. Or I guess maybe I should say any developer or builder, with the exception of the city of Fremont, who it appears right now can do whatever they want, regardless of what they require their citizens to do. Grass was to be planted on the berm surrounding the pond so that it wouldn't be an eyesore to those 27 homes that back up to it. And grass has been planted and has started to grow. But if you walk along there, there's as much or more weeds growing than there is grass. And if the weeds are not treated, as they have not been yet, they will overtake the grass, making the area an eyesore and difficult for the city to maintain. Earlier today, as was stated, the berm was mowed, but basically just on the top of it. The west side of the berm was left unmowed. And that's the part that's very visible to these 27 homeowners. And it's being left unattended, probably because it's nearly impossible to maintain it because of the way it's built so close to, and in some cases, actually protruding into the private lots of homeowners. The homeowners in the area were told by our previous city administration and by employees at the contractor that drainage tubes were going to be put into the berm to allow drainage off of their yards so that they had somewhere for the water to escape. There are no drain tubes, and this spring, with the minimal amount of rain we've had, you're getting standing water in the back of these yards because it doesn't have anywhere to go. Many of these homes affected have fences in their backyards, and the dirt is in many places piled right up against those fences. Some of the fences now lean because of the pressure of dirt piles against them. Those that have gates cannot be opened. They have no way out of their yard that they used to have. And the berm is physically intruding into the backyards and causing damage to almost every one of these 27 homes along Laverna Street. This doesn't affect me. I live on the other side of the street. I can't even see it from where I'm at. It affects 27 of my neighbors, 27 of your neighbors. And in simple terms, right now, the city of Fremont is not being a good neighbor to the 27 people that own property along that berm. These issues need to be corrected, and we plead with the council that these issues all be looked at, and at some point, a change order be put in effect to make changes to the design of the retention pond. Thank you.
Okay, I have a few folks on here with topics as Deerfield development. I just remind you're speaking on any item that's not on the agenda. So if you are speaking on the Deerfield apartments, that's item 5 on the public hearings. So that's when you would come up. I just want to be clear on that. So. Okay, all right. So with that, Frank, comment. Okay. Sue Patterson.
I'm neighbors to these gals here, and with all that's been spoken already, I am very much against what's been going on.
Can you please come to the podium and speak your name and address, please? Thank you.
Sue Patterson, and my address is 2743 North Laverna Street. What's been spoken already from my neighbors here right next door and some of the others, I definitely agree what's going on is totally against what we ever thought would happen to our neighborhood. It's really downgraded it. I don't know what it'll do to the value of our home someday, but it's very discouraging. Now I've noticed geese are coming up. I'm not sure, but I'm sure it's just all that's going on has attracted geese, and like Elaine said, we may have snakes, could have mosquitoes. So I am definitely against what's all happened. Very discouraged.
Okay. Pamela Christ.
Hi, my name is Pamela Christ, and my husband is sitting back here also. His name is David, and we live at 1034 East 8th Street, and we are known as the watchdogs of 8th Street as we keep an eye on the neighborhood. Anyway, I was hoping to talk to one of the police officers if they were going to be here today about school safety, whether we have 10 grandchildren and we would like to see if our schools are safe. And as we all have heard about the mass shootings in schools, I'm very concerned about that, whether we can breach those doors in case there is an incident. And then if we can get in, if the police officers can get in, and we shouldn't even be talking about this, but we need to know that our schools in Fremont are safe. And Midland College, like I said, we do live next to Midland College, and we love our Midland kids over there, each and every one of them. And I don't know who to talk to about that. Can somebody
We
give me an
we
answer?
can't answer during this session.
I understand that, but is there any way you can pass information to somebody else that can talk to us about it?
Again, I can't comment on anything during this session. This is
Okay.
just public comment.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. So I will keep in touch with you folks in the Fremont Police Department. We do all love our city. So yeah, have a good night.
Thank you. Okay. All right, so 6:44, we have 15 minutes. Again, this is open public comment. Any member of the public can come and speak for up to 5 minutes. That's not on the agenda. There's also comment cards in the back. And if you are wishing to speak, please come to the front and sign it. Again, if you're new walking in, this is open public comment up until 7 o'clock. Gives any member of the public an opportunity to speak on any item that's not on the agenda for up to 5 minutes. If you do wish to speak, you can come forward and sign in. I'll call on you. Four. Yes. Mhm. No, that's the same one right here. Yeah. Is that first reading or second? Okay. Because did we do that last week or not? Okay. 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 Okay, probably. It's probably a lot. Yeah, that seems like a lot. Okay. What's that? Yeah. Always too short. I think that's what Memorial Day is. For one, our kids need to understand freedom's not free, and we had a good event.
Yeah.
You heading down to Hastings a lot these days? No. That's good.
When kids can't leave this house, they're not allowed to stay here. You know, I understand, you gotta have some kind of control. You can't just have a law enforcement. But you live it here. Somebody wants to respond and I get in a debate.
A lot of chatter
Still
here.
within like 3 minutes or whatever.
It's all right. It's all good.
Cedars an interesting. I went there, 4 or 5 years ago. Some guy I know was getting married, so bachelor party, bunch of guys. They got a bus, and went different bars. We ended up at Cedars the last time. Got to be Fountain Hall and Fountain Hall, this will be last round. Said, look, it's 1:30, they're still serving. It's 2 o'clock, they're still serving. That's something somebody likes. Until everybody goes. It says concept shop. We stay open as late as you want to see.
Used to be a shop. Just set up.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, their lazy foot's on a good fish fry. That's such a very nice beer. They put it good. I still love the I'm with the last few. Yeah. We lost many. Sure.
I never thought you and I'd ever get this old. Any close call,
Yeah.
I just think that's one thing. Standing in that water. No. Myron and Jerry. All of a sudden, that cage. It's falling more. You went by it. Standing still illuminated. We're a economy one time. Whether or not we can so we're other guys stated. Like that. So like,
A few times I caught on fish. Once a year, green could be dragging down there. I think that's something to talk Yeah, they could have made it through. Yeah. They don't want to spend any more money on it. They have to, because they lost their ass on that. Yeah, what they're trying to do. They don't want storm sewer. They have to storm sewer. That's for storm.
They built a casino.
And you could have walked to.
Yeah, yeah. We could rent out park.
Sell beer over the fence. Hell, yeah.
Uber drivers.
Well, you'd have to take deals, 'cause I'd be there gambling.
Oh, really?
Depends on what happens. I don't know what
I think we're all done.
Maybe you say anything about it.
I understand from talking to yours. He said, well, it's item 22, and I had it up in front of me. I said, well, item 26, we talked about approving the change to Lincoln Avenue and 20 Beach Street. He said, yeah. He said, but that's abbreviated. He says, this contract is with the same contractor. And part of this resolution is to pay them their final payment for the retention bond, and they go through the change order and other stuff. That's why at that point, you get a good thing. How can you get these guys final payment? They got a mess on them, so. Third from the last. All of these. Yeah, consent agenda. 6 through 14. They can lump those all together. Usually somebody up there will want to pull one or two of them out, move it further down. But you won't have 22 items. You'll probably end up with about 16 or 17. Most of these will get lumped together and done in a couple of minutes. Sure, I'm gonna grab another one. Keep that one. I'm gonna grab another one.
Okay, the time is now 7 o'clock. Before we begin, we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'll open the regular city council meeting. The time is 7 o'clock. The Opens Meeting Act is posted on the rear wall next to the agendas. This time we'll have roll call.
Please cast your vote for roll call. 8 council members are present, Mayor.
Thank you. Next is mayor's comments. First, I'd like to start off with our service awards tonight. We have 3 of them. First is from the Fremont Department of Utilities. Spencer McAndrew is celebrating 5 years of service as a line worker with the city of Fremont. Also, I just believe he retired today. Pat Tawney, captain of our fire department, 30 years of service. So want to thank Pat for his dedicated service in our fire department. And then finally, I have here with us from our Fremont Department of Utilities, our water superintendent, Mike Party, 10 years of service. Mike, why don't you come up and accept your award? Let's give him a round of applause. Big reason why we have the best tasting water in America. All right, and next, I'd just like to take a moment to recognize a group of folks that are really making a big difference in Fremont in regards to our creative district. So the state of Nebraska recently established a program allowing communities like Fremont to apply for what's called a creative district. These are areas that are designated to help spur our young people and families to continue to stay in Nebraska and promote our arts. And we've had a great collaboration going on with a lot of different organizations, including Fremont Art Association, the Dodge County CVB, the city, and dozens of others that have been meeting here for the past few months. And today we officially put our letter of intent into the state of Nebraska. And so there are lots of grants available and lots of funding opportunities available for these creative districts. But I just wanted to take a moment and again, applaud the work that's been doing collaboratively as a city. And it's great work. And I hope to report more on this in the future. But again, great job to all those involved with making that letter of intent happen on the creative districts. That's all for my comments tonight. We'll move on to item 1, motion to adopt the current agenda for the May 31st, 2022 regular meeting. Are there any changes to the agenda proposed? Councilman Gibson?
No, I was just gonna make the motion.
Okay. I don't see any changes, so go ahead.
Okay, I make that motion.
Councilman Sukram?
I'll second.
Okay, cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Next is public hearings. Item 2, resolution 2022-083, recommending approval of Class D liquor license application of Cubby's Inc., doing business as Cubby's Fremont at 2108 at 450 South Broad Street. We'll have staff report.
Mayor and council, this is a liquor license for Cubby's. It's going to be where Brady's Meats is at currently. They have a kind of a license bridging their operation currently. Notice of the public hearing was published on May 20th, 2022. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have regarding this application. We did receive positive recommendations from the police and planning departments. So,
any questions? Councilman Yerger.
Just one quick one and an observation. So when this was Brady's, did they have a Class C or a Class D license? Not that it necessarily matters. I'm just curious.
I don't recall.
Okay, and it looks like the other Cubbies here in Fremont are already all Class D, which is off sale only, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? I'll open the public hearing. Any comments from the public on resolution 2022-083? Seeing no comments, I'll close the public hearing. Any additional comments from council? Councilman Yerger?
If not, I move to approve resolution 2022-083.
Okay, Councilman Sukram,
I'll second.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Moving on to item 3, resolution 2022-084, recommending approval of Class C liquor license application of Fremont Hotels, Inc., doing business as Holiday Inn Express at 2415 North Lincoln Avenue. Staff report.
Mayor and council, this is a Class C license, Holiday Inn Express. It also was published May 20th for the public hearing to be held today. Positive recommendations from the police and fire department. This being a Class C, as Councilman Yerger mentioned, Class D is off sale, so people take it. This would be basically an establishment inside where people would be served inside. So,
questions for staff? Seeing none, I'll open the public hearing on resolution 2022-084. Any comments from the public? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Any additional comments from council? Councilman Gibson?
I would like to know the difference between a Class C and a Class D license.
so Class C is similar to your typical bar where people are drinking on site, And a class D would be more like a convenience store where people are taking it and it's not consumed on site. And I believe a class I is kind of a mixture of the two, but the attorney may know more, be more familiar with those specifics.
I believe Class D is both on and off sale. And just a further comment, typically a lot of bars will get that even though they don't do much off sale because they're concerned that one of their people don't know that it's only Class C and they may sell a bottle to go or something like that. So most bars will get a Class D just to protect themselves from that. But this particular circumstance, somebody could buy a 6-pack or something to go up to their room or whatever else. So I'm sure that's why they're getting Class D.
Okay, Councilwoman Ganem.
I would move that we approve resolution 2022-084.
Okay. Councilman Jensen,
I'll make the second.
cast your votes.
For Class C license.
This is for a Class C license,
Class
yes.
C 2022-084, yeah. Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Okay, moving on to item 4, ordinance 5619, requesting change of zone on properties generally bounded by 9th Street on the south, 15th Street on the north, 8th Street on the west, and Park Street on the east from suburban commercial to auto urban residential.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council, Jennifer Dam, Planning Director. This is a request to change the zoning of an area that is residentially developed from commercial zoning to residential zoning. I'm not quite sure how it came to have commercial zoning. I looked back prior to the update and adoption of the UDC. It was a mixed-use corridor with SC special corridor zoning. So all I can figure is that that must have been somehow misconstrued and carried over to be suburban commercial zoning. The area is developed residentially. There is a National Register historic district that covers half a block on either side of Broad Street from 9th Street to 16th Street. Staff recommends that this be changed to residential to retain the residential character of this area. We have a similar request that will be coming forward for the area basically east of this building between Military and 8th Street. The Planning Commission held that one over because there are a couple of questions. So they'll hear that again at their next meeting, and then it'll be coming to you at the end of June. So just wanted to let you know some people are aware that there are 2 of those. I wanted to let you know where we were in that process. I'll be happy to try and answer any questions.
Any questions? Councilman Yerger.
Is the fairly new building that's to the west of the library, if I looked at the map correctly, is that included or not included? It's a care facility or?
It just includes the 2 lots that are on the south side of 10th Street. And it includes the library block and then north. It does not go east to Park Street.
I said library, I misspoke, auditorium. When I'm on the west side of Broad Street, west of the auditorium, there's a fairly newly constructed or remodeled facility there. And I forget.
That's on the other side of H Street. It's on the west side of H Street.
It's not at issue here. That's my
right.
point.
That's correct.
Okay. And so then all of this is really consistent of residential housing.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councilman Jensen.
Just, is there any reason not to do this in 1 reading instead of 3?
I don't have a problem with it. I know I have had a number of phone calls about this. I've had no objections from any of the neighbors. Everybody was very grateful for that. The military one, we did have a couple people who had concerns because they wanted some commercial uses, but along Broad Street, I've had none.
Okay, thank you. I'll now open the public hearing on ordinance 5619. Seeing no comments, I'll close the public hearing. Any additional comments from council? Councilman Yerger?
No additional comments, but if there aren't any, I'd move first reading of ordinance 5619. Also stating for the record, because this is a zoning change and I don't anticipate staff's going to tell us that this is a high priority for us to get this through in a rush, I would not be in favor of waiving off zoning changes on one reading. But I would support first reading on this one.
Councilman Legban?
I'll second that.
Okay, cast your votes, introduce and hold first reading.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Okay, we'll now have first reading.
An ordinance of the city of Fremont, Nebraska, amending ordinance number 5427 as it pertains to the zoning map to rezone the property generally located between 9th and 15th Streets and between N and H and North Park Streets from SC suburban commercial to AR auto urban residential, providing for repeal of ordinances in conflict herewith, providing for severability and providing an effective date on first reading.
Okay, well, Councilman Vaughn?
Am I still allowed to make a motion to suspend rules? and hold
Yes.
third reading? I'll make that motion.
Okay. Is there a second to suspend rules and hold final reading? Mark Jensen.
I'll second.
Okay, cast your votes.
The motion fails 5-3, Mayor.
Okay. Moving on to item 5, resolution 2022-085 for conditional use permit to allow the expansion of the Deerfield Clubhouse Apartments by adding a 44-unit building and 2 8-unit buildings for a total of 60 units. Go ahead.
Good evening. This is a request to add on to the Deerfield apartment complex. It would expand to the vacant property that is to the east. They would add a 44-unit building similar to the one that was recently built that has the garages underneath, and 2 8-unit buildings. The 8-unit buildings are going to be designed to be more residential and low scale in appearance. Similar to some people have seen the units out at Prairie Queen in Papillion. The goal of that is to create the missing middle type of housing, but to transition to a single family neighborhood with a lower density. Initially, the developer's drainage plan did meet all of the requirements of the drainage manual that has not yet been adopted. There were still residents of the Deerfield neighborhood who had some concerns. The developer met with them and added additional drainage items to the drainage plan. They are going to have an infiltration bioswale and add amended soils to the area to help even more with the drainage as it is. The developer provided us traffic study. It indicated no additional improvements were needed. The staff recommends conditional approval. I don't think we're going to have a problem. It just didn't get on the site plan. The fire chief has asked for 3 additional hydrants and verification that the turning radii going into the complex and the emergency drive between this and the older complex is strong enough to handle our new 100,000-pound fire truck. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Okay, thank you. Now open the public hearing on resolution 2022-085. Please state your name and address.
Good evening.
Jeff Ray with JEO Consulting, 11213 Davenport, Omaha. I would just like to reiterate everything that Jennifer has just said. So I hope that you understand that the applicant here has done above and beyond what was really necessary. It was been very sensitive from the beginning to address the adjacent single family and transitioning architecturally down to a smaller unit to make it more compatible, and also did a traffic study to determine that there will be no impacts in that area. We did do an analysis to determine that the turning radiuses and everything work for the fire department. So all of that, when those plans come in, should satisfy them. In addition, as she reiterated, the drainage pieces that were put into place after we heard some of the neighbors' concerns, the developer went above and beyond what was necessary and really wanted to appease them and to be a good neighbor, and ultimately will hopefully help those neighbors at Deerfield Lake by reducing the amount of runoff that ultimately ends up into their lake at that compared to what the current conditions are today. With that, with the developer as well as the engineer are also here for further questions.
Thank you. Okay, any other public comment?
My name is Frank Komet. I live at 1315 Wilmot Street. I have been a resident out there for 22 years. And first of all, I'd like to say I'm not opposed to any further development around our neighborhood or in Fremont. I'm fully supportive of any further growth for the city. And I want to thank the developer for meeting with our board and going above and beyond. But I do have a few questions. The lake is privately owned by the HOA. Can the developer legally allow their water to flow into our lake? When this first neighborhood was first platted, there were no additional apartments in that plat. Just the 4 or 5 units that were out there plus our neighborhood. So our lake also has no outflow. So what happens if we get too much water in there? Who's going to be financially responsible for that? Along with the water comes additional silt and runoff. Should there be an agreement between the developer and the HOA to help cover the cost of lake management? Today, we spend about $7,000 a year in maintaining the water quality out there. We're also saving because over 22 years, that lake has become shallower, so it has less capacity to hold water. So I would like to see potentially that drainage study should cover the entire drainage basin, not just what's coming off of there. It should take into account how the neighborhood has developed over the last 30 years. So, and then also environmental. There's environmental issues, and that's part of why we pay somebody to come out on an annual basis 6 times a year to spray for algae because we have runoff from fertilizer from people's yards. So we're taking that into account. Further runoff potentially could add additional chemicals into our lake. So I would like to see a new drainage study done encompassing the entire drainage basin. And I would also like to see the environmental issues possibly be addressed. We have 105 houses out there, and if you go out there any night of the week, there's kids fishing, there's kids swimming, there's people on boats. We have our own little paradise out there, and we just want to protect that. So, but again, I'd like to thank you guys for doing what you have so far. But I'd like to have them continue to work with the HOA and make sure all our concerns are addressed.
Okay, any other comments from the public?
Stool. My name's Carol Fensky. I live at 1325 Wilmot Street. Built my home in Deerfield about 4 years ago. We all have very beautiful homes. We take pride in our homes. When we had the flood of 2019, that water traveled a long way and was very close to getting into our lake. I mean, we were advised to evacuate. So I'm concerned with the water coming, then there is going to be some overflow. I know we talked about, or the developers talked about reducing it, but it's not going to eliminate it. What's going to happen when our basements flood? Who's going to be responsible? None of us want that to happen. So I would just appreciate it if you would take our concerns and address them. Thank you.
Any other comments on this item?
My name is Paul Knapp. I live at 2263 Stork Circle. I've lived at Deerfield since its inception. I'm going on 26 years of living out there. I too want Fremont to grow. I have no objections to the additional apartments. Where my concern is they talk about slowing down the flow into our lake. In the state of Nebraska, you cannot drain your property onto a neighbor. I helped out with the natural resource district doing terracing. And that is one of their biggest concerns is we cannot drain onto the neighbor. So when they put in their drain tiles, they sometimes run 1,000 feet to get to a ditch or something to alleviate any chance of water getting into their neighbor's property. What they're talking about is slowing down the process of that water coming into ours. Well, to me, that's against what the state says. The state says you can't put your water onto a neighbor's. So I have concerns about that. I think it could be alleviated if we could clean the drainage ditches along Morningside and Old Highway 8. I know that's a sore subject because the county doesn't want to do it. The city doesn't want to foot the bill for it. But when they put in that temporary entryway where they're talking about for fire trucks to come in and stuff like that, they put in culverts, laid them right on top of the ground that's already there. That ground is almost a foot above the other culverts along Morningside Road. So how is that going to drain anything? To me, before anything can be, I think we could probably alleviate all the problem if we just cleaned out the ditches and got the water flowing to the east how it's supposed to go. I know nobody wants to foot that bill because it's expensive. However, I don't want my basement, I have a walkout basement. I came within 3 inches of having water in it twice since I've lived out there. And now it sounds like we're going to get more water coming into that lake. And like they talked, we don't have a way to get the water out. It's just going to come up and come into basements, and then who's responsible? So thank you for your time.
Rich Capel, 2209 Pathfinder Drive. Expanding on Paul's comments a little bit, when we have such an issue on Old Highway 8 as my property backs up to it and I'm not a lake front property, we have a severe drainage issue on the south side of Deerfield due to those ditches that come across Old 8. I believe some of the council member or some of the commissioners on the planning commission have maybe even admitted on the record that it's been a pretty poor situation for the county out there. We, after the flood of 19, all through summer of 19, summer of 20, the water table was so high out there that we had to pump out of our sump pump 24 hours a day. I literally had 200 feet of PVC pipe running across my backyard because that water table was so high. Now you couple that with the development that was done just to the east of us with the Luther Road situation, and then moving all that water out of that property, supposedly to the south and supposedly to the east. We've lived out there 7 years. I've had 2 years of water table problems, and that was during the construction of the Luther Road development situation there. So as we tend to look at this going forward and we have more development and obviously more density and stuff like that, again, I'll reiterate, I love development. I have no problem with growth and stuff like that. I would just like to see that water moved efficiently and out of our potential for more floods. I appreciate your time.
Any other comments from the public? Okay, seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Additional comments from council. Councilman Yerger.
Well, I'd like to start my comments with some kudos to the developer in this regard. One, I think you've been proactive, more proactive than I've seen with other developers with regards to neighboring properties in an attempt to bring this together. Sat in a meeting that I was invited to. You took action upon that and went and talked to the residents. And so I'm quite appreciative of that because these residents live in my ward. The drainage issues were discussed then. You obviously discussed drainage issues with the homeowners. That was good. You included all the studies, the rain study, a traffic study. So you're following the necessary protocols that we expect for developers when they file for permits and developments like this. So I give you lots of kudos for setting an example for us, even as a city, because we don't always do the things that you were doing for the neighboring areas. Having said all that, I am somewhat concerned about the issues that I'm hearing from the residents this evening with regards to, did the drainage studies and the rain garden study and all of those things that were done take into account the concerns that they're raising with regards to just slowing down the water and the water flow and runoff that might get into the lake, as to, yeah, there was always going to be some, it will just be less, or we took all that into account. This is natural. I don't know, and maybe the residents could speak to this, someone, but once the water is in the lake, do you have a facility to pump out, or is it national absorption? Okay, so it has to go out by seepage. So any additional water that's put in there can't get out. I don't know what the volume and capacities are, and I don't know if the city engineer has looked in that as a part of any of the studies that were filed. But I think it's important that we do no harm to our neighbors. And that was the intent of what the developers were proposing, and for visiting with the standards and the building heights and the landscaping and the open space and everything that would make this blend into the community as best as I've seen in quite a while with regards to city development. So again, I'm really appreciative of that. We ended up with 3 conditions in this resolution dealing with the hydrants, the load capacity for the fire truck, and the turning radius for emergency vehicles all need to be accommodated. I don't know if it's appropriate. I'd ask other council members to think about it. I'd welcome comment from the builders as to whether or not any further analysis could be performed, or city engineering, but in that regard too. Any further analysis could be done relative to water runoff capacity and environmental issues with regards to contamination of the lake. Was that adequately addressed in the drainage study? Does anyone know? And if not, what would it take to have that augmented? Anybody?
You can go ahead.
Okay, I
applicant.
don't know if you want
Just-
me to ask or.
Just
you
state
want
your
to
name
take
and
it.
address.
All right, again, Jeff Ray with JEO Consulting, 11213 Davenport. So the drainage study looked at the existing conditions, said how much water is currently running off and getting into the lake, okay? We then did an analysis of the proposed drainage facilities and reduced that amount from what's currently being run into the lake. So the situation post-development will be better than it is today without the development. And I can let Dave, who reviewed the report, reiterate that and talk about that. That means you talk about do no harm, we're actually leaving a better situation with the development than without the development. I think we'll just leave it at that.
Okay, I would ask legal. One of the spokesperson referenced state law with regards to water drainage and do no harm to your neighbor. Are you familiar with any Nebraska statute that specifically deals with that? And if so, what's that code?
I actually took a note on that and was hoping somebody would ask for that. We would have moats around all of our properties if you couldn't drain onto other people's property. We can't change the natural flow to unjustly dump water onto other people's properties. But we certainly can take it through the natural drainage way, and the natural drainage way in a area that is developed becomes how that property has been graded to then drain. Now, if that development area then drains onto a new area by the way it was designed, then they have a problem. But if it's following its natural tendencies for drainage in the first place, then the lower property, in a sense, has an obligation to take on that water. If it wasn't the case, we wouldn't be able to build nearly anything without building a wall around them and having retention of all of the water that would come off of that property until it evaporates. It's just practically and legally is not the case.
Well, I understand natural flow, but to do no harm to the first in versus the second in philosophy, we've had considerable debate on in this council chamber in the past. I'm just trying to follow up to see whether or not there was statutory authority specifically that you're.
No, there's not any statutory authority, but again, if for some reason they were to channel the water into it, that it's starting to erode the property and creating problems, then they have a separate cause of action against them for that, because you can't, we can't put a fire hose onto their property in a sense and have drainage just crashing in on their property. What I'm getting from the engineer's report, as well as our own engineer reviewing it, is they reviewed the different retainage that's going to occur. They've actually improved it. And I wouldn't say it's just improved it from the flow on there, but if they have a bioswale, the effluent coming out would be cleaner than what they currently receive into the lake.
Okay, it's good to know. If there's any comments from the engineer, also, Mayor, I'd be interested in hearing anything you'd have to add.
Okay, thank you. Councilwoman Ganem.
No, I'd just like to reiterate that we appreciate a developer that goes above and beyond and really tries to address in the issues of their neighbors and being a good neighbor. And as I understand, the water would be less going in now than what it is existing, and it'd be cleaner than what it is currently going into that lake. Am I correct in that assessment?
At least that's what the engineers are telling us, yes. Whether some people may have observations that differ with that, but the science from the engineers is telling us, yes, that's the case.
Okay. Are there any other comments from council? Okay. Councilman Jensen?
No other comments. I'll make a motion to approve resolution 2022-085.
Councilman Legband?
I'll second that.
Cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Moving on to the consent agenda, all items in the consent agenda are considered to be routine by the city council and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member or a citizen so requests, in which event the item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. Are there any items to be removed from the consent agenda?
I need to mention a correction to the minutes.
Okay,
Item 7.
item 7. Any other items? Councilman Yerger.
Items 9 and 13, please.
Any other items? Councilman Ellis. All right, I would take a motion to approve items 6, 8, 10, and 12. Councilman Yerger,
Motion to so approve.
Councilman Gibson,
I'll second that.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Item 7 is dispense with and approve May 10, 2022 regular city council meeting minutes. Go ahead, Tyler, on your.
Thank you, Mayor. There was a correction needed to the minutes. It was brought to my attention by Councilmember Yerger that on the final item, he voted in opposition to that item passing, and so I would just make that correction. I'm not sure whether motions needed to make that correction, but I will do so.
I'll just take a motion to amend the minutes. Councilman Jensen.
I'll make the motion to amend and correct the minutes.
Okay, Councilman Legban.
I'll second that.
Okay, cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Take a motion to approve as amended. Councilman Legban,
I make a motion to approve as amended.
Councilwoman Ganem,
Second,
cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Moving on to item 9, motion authorizing special designated license, local recommendation for an outdoor event at Tin Lizzie at 1682 East 23rd Street.
Mayor-
Staff report.
Mayor and council, I spoke with Councilmember Yerger prior to the meeting regarding this item. He contacted the applicant regarding the area in the rear, and it need to be smaller than what's listed in their map. And I believe they came to an agreement on the area.
Questions for staff? Councilman Yerger.
Yes, this event came up last year and the application request had a 400 by 400 area as well. So I'm sure this is a Scribner's error with regards to, in the end, was a request for 150 by 50 size area of the parking lot. I did contact him before the meeting tonight and they said we should correct the size to 50 to 150. If that's not correct, they would check with the rest of their team and we could fix it at the next meeting. But for tonight's meeting, we should consider it a request for 50 by 150.
Okay, any other questions? Okay. So what we need legal is a motion to amend with the corrected or the agreed upon.
Yeah, I would make a motion. I would just go ahead with a motion to approve, subject to correction of the area to 150 by 50.
Okay. Councilman Vaughn.
Motion to approve, subject to the change it to 50 by 150.
Councilman Yerger.
Second.
Okay. Cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Item 11, resolution 2022-086, authorizing mayor to sign state of Nebraska Department of Economic Development, DR 4420 Infrastructure Match Program Opt-out Notification Letter.
Hi, good evening, Mayor and City Council. So before you tonight is a staff report. The state of Nebraska has created the Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery Program, also known as CDBG-DR, in response to the 2019 flood event. A portion of this program was allocated for the infrastructure match program. This covers FEMA obligated projects to assist with the 5% local match that communities matched for either hazard mitigation grant projects or public assistance grant projects. These are specific federal grant programs. The city of Fremont has 10 FEMA PA or public assistance grant projects, and we had 0 HGMP eligible projects. The maximum reimbursement that the city might get in a generous amount would be about $60,000. And we have 2 options. We can either withdraw from the process through the opt-out letter, which is included in your packet, or we could move through the pre-application process and into the application phase. Staff recommends opting out of this process as the amount of staff time rerouted to move through this process would outweigh the possible financial reimbursement that we might receive. And I'm here to answer any questions.
Councilman Ellis.
Yeah, the one question I had was, is this just because we don't have any projects that qualify?
We have 10 projects that could qualify. You know more once you move through the pre-application phase. But the 5% of that, the maximum would be like 57,000 some odd dollars that we could receive. And so that's like the glass ceiling. We probably would come well under that.
Are a lot of other cities seeing the same thing? I mean, this is free money. I was just hard to turn down. Free money.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. We were kind of shocked going through this process, but there are others. We have to send an opt letter because the state needs to show the federal government that they have contacted everyone.
Okay.
But I know, and Dan can correct me if I'm wrong, because he handled these actual FEMA grants that came in because of the flooding. But I think that the city itself saw less damage than say the county.
Okay,
So,
thank
yeah.
you very much.
Yep.
Councilman Yerger.
So to make sure that I fully understand here, the amount of community benefit isn't like $60,000. The amount of that's our 5% that we can't necessarily justify spending the administrative cost to just get back $60,000. Is that correct?
Right.
But the benefit to the community as a whole for the 10 projects, if they were allowed to proceed and we were awarded all of them, what's that worth?
The max cap would be $60,000.
For the 95% that's provided by others?
The 5% of the projects.
That's our cost.
Right.
But what's the benefit to the community? It's the other 95% that's paid for by somebody else, right?
Right. So the federal government paid 90%.
So
State paid-
million two or $1 million.
Yeah.
So we're foregoing $1 million of potential improvements that we could obtain for the community because it might cost us more than $60,000 to do the requisite paperwork.
Dan Goebel in the accounting department. No, the total best available cost for any entity is about $1.2 million.
Okay.
So FEMA comes in and pays 90% of that, and then the state and the city split the remaining 10%.
Right.
So what we could recoup is just that 5%, which would be just a hair under $60,000.
What we could recoup. So the area residents or whoever is involved in any of this work that they're paying for is only going to get $60,000. They're not going to get $1 million.
This is only in regards to public facilities.
Public facilities only.
Yes.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure I understood what we were actually foregoing.
Yep. No,
I'm with
this is-
Mr. Ellis. It's free money, it sounds
is-
like.
yeah.
So I don't want to give up a lot of money if $60,000 administrative cost is within $3,000 and we can get hundreds of thousands of dollars. I want to do it.
Yeah.
If we can't get any money for it, that's a different matter.
No, this
It's
is
the-
maximum
it's the-
$60,000 for public assistance program. So it's just the municipal buildings.
Thank
and
you for
related
clarifying.
Sure.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay. Comments from the public? Okay. Any additional comments from council? If there are none, I'd take a motion in regards to this item. Councilman Vaughn.
Motion to approve and allow the mayor to sign.
Councilman Legband,
I will second that.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Item 13, resolution 2022-089, awarding the contract for the sanitary sewer repair 2022 project. I'll have staff report.
Troy Shabin, Assistant General Manager, Utilities. The utilities bid, we have in our budget every year to line our existing sanitary sewers. The sewers get cracks, they offset, they get roots and stuff in them. So every year we budget $275,000 to do a cast in place liner. It's a lot less disruptive. You basically put the liner in the sewer through the manhole. You don't have to tear out any street or disrupt the traffic. We bid this at the end of April. Utility and Infrastructure Board approved it 4-0, and we're here asking for approval tonight. I can answer any questions.
Okay, Councilman Vaughn.
Yeah, I'm just curious, after the liner goes in, how do the individual hookups then get
They have
penetrated or
a
perforated?
they have a robot, a little robot comes in. So when that liner goes in, it'll actually dimple on the services. They go through first, but the first thing they're gonna do is they're gonna go through and they're gonna jet the whole thing out, clean the whole thing out as clean as they can get it, get all the debris out, vac everything out. Then they go through and then they mark all of the active service lines. And then they'll put that sock in there and it'll actually dimple into the services. And then they send a little robot with a Dremel, and that Dremel will actually turn and it'll cut that service line right out.
Awesome.
And they do that with a camera, a TV camera.
Thank you.
Councilman Legband.
Yeah, so this came well under budget. Did I hear that right?
We usually bid about 275. So what we usually do is we try to do these about every other year. And what we're gonna do is come back later this year, hopefully, this summer, and try to get our 275 in this year with our 275 for the next year, and have them do that job from September 20th to October 15th. And that way we can save on a double mobilization, and we'll save some costs if the contractor can make that work.
Councilman Yerger.
Well, I pulled this off the agenda, Troy, and for legal. It says the only document in support of this, besides the resolution itself, is the one-page contract document with a whereas statement that sets forth references to the proposal, the related contract documents, all of which are attached and made part of this contract. And in the material presented to council, I don't find any of those documents. And I'm wondering why not? I remember very early on when you came to council, Adams and Sullivan advised council, we should not be approving contracts we haven't seen or been able to read. And the documents associated with this whereas statement are not here. I'm not sure why they're not here. So 2 questions. 1, shouldn't they be here? And 2, has your legal firm reviewed them and where are they?
Never tell from my side whether that's on or not. A couple things. I do know that Travis is in the process of working out a form for, there's been kind of different variations of this. We talked about it in our agenda meeting. Secondly, based on the fact that those, it's referencing basically the special provisions, the specs and so forth, as long as those are contained within the, what I want to say, the city, and they're reviewable by the council, I would say would request those, because my guess is your specifications is probably a couple hundred pages.
The standard conditions of the engineering contract is about 700 pages long.
And so from that standpoint, to in a sense be cluttering the agenda is, I don't think it would be efficient for us to be putting those in the agenda, but they are available for inspection by the city council. So you could review those prior to the meeting.
Well, perhaps the specifications or proposal is quite lengthy. I guess I'm questioning whether the contract itself would be 700 pages. And the reason for my asking this is I have some prior experience years ago when the city had contracted a contractor to do sewer line work. They went home on the 4th of July, didn't cap the lines, and everybody in the area up around 19th and Union had their basements flooded with 24 inches of sewage. Had it not been for the terms of the agreement as to who was going to pay for those damages, there would have been some serious problems for homeowners. So I was keenly interested in what provisions are there here with regards to liability remedy, and what I get to see is nothing.
Again, if they're not, they should be in those related documents that are all part of this. I would agree that it would be nice to have that in there, but at the end of the day that's a negligence item on their part and they'd have liability anyway.
Is this a matter of urgency for you, Troy, to have this contract approved tonight?
I don't think it is. I would say that we do these every other year. The documents haven't changed other than the street names, the street locations, the dates. It's the same packet that would have came to you last time we did it. It has all the same references from the time you were referencing.
Okay.
That doesn't change.
Okay, I won't pursue it any further. I'll take the admonition of council that says, based on council's authority, the proposal, the contract documents that are not attached herewith will be specific enough to protect the city as to not to worry it based on your legal recommendation.
I have not specifically looked at it myself, and now whether
Do you want time to look at it so we don't approve this till
well,
next
if it's
meeting?
not a big rush, that'd be fine. We can certainly look at that and see if that's okay. I don't know if Travis actually has. Again, I know that he was working on trying to get a better format on this. So my assumption is that he has, but let's not assume. If it's not a rush, we certainly can put it off. You got a meeting in 2 weeks.
Okay, then I would make a motion to continue this item to the next meeting to give legal counsel opportunity to review the necessary paperwork to make sure the city's obligations and liabilities are covered.
Councilman Gibson.
I would second that motion.
Okay, cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Item 14, motion authorizing special designated license, local recommendation for John C. Fremont Beer Garden.
Mayor and council will receive the the special designated license. This is going to be for the beer garden for John C. Fremont Days. LA Fire Door is going to be the requester of the SDL. My understanding is that the John C. Fremont Days large recommendation for, all of the closures and the street closures and everything, that's going to be on for our June 14th meeting. I did verify with them that the Ingle Fritz parking lot, which is this location, is going to be included in their ask on our June 14th meeting. And so I'd be happy to answer any other questions you may have.
Okay, Councilman Ellis.
Yeah, I apologize. I didn't realize we had another SDL ahead of this, or I would have asked the question then. Has the process for the SDLs changed over the years, Tyler? It just seems like we're not getting the insurance information here, and I don't know if we did in the past or not. I was just curious.
On these SDLs, they're either a nonprofit organization or they are a liquor holder. And so that's they have insurance. They go through a state process for that. And so we don't require a certificate of insurance for that. There's probably been less of them coming forward due to COVID and things like that. Things are starting to pick back up though. This process, my process is if it's going to be indoors somewhere, I handle a lot of those administratively. If it's outdoors and has potential to impact a neighbor or make noise, I just want to make sure the council is aware of those. So I bring those outdoor special designated licenses to the council.
Did the state legislation add features to a liquor license to allow them to do outside their property?
I believe so. I think it was to extend it, but I don't know all of the specifics, but I think it was to extend it for additional seating to additional indoor potentially.
Just
maybe.
indoor?
I have to double check.
Okay,
I hate
that
to-
was my
yeah, but-
concern is.
Yeah, there is another item on here where I believe it's the 505 is wanting to have a little area outside. Now that's in the public right of way. In these downtown areas, much of that's going to be in the public right of way. And so we would be a part of
Okay.
that conversation. Tin Lizzy, it's a private parking lot back behind, maybe not in that situation. but
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you very much,
You're
Tyler.
welcome.
Councilman Yerger.
So to follow up on Councilman Ellis's questions with regards to the designated licenses and insurance. This one is being held in conjunction with John C. Fremont Days, but it's being sponsored by LA Fireproof Door. Is that, so the license is for LA Fireproof Door to hold this event
So-
in this parking lot?
So the SDL is going to be held by LA Fire Door. The location is going to be requested by the John C. Fremont Days organization, and they're going to come forward with a list of requests for the John C. Fremont Days event. And I
Okay.
believe that typically includes, probably a certificate of liability.
Okay,
insurance.
so perhaps they should have and could have come together, but they aren't. So my question goes along the same lines as Councilman Ellis's question then. So who is responsible if any insurance is necessary here? John C. Fremont Days and that organization, or LA Fire Door? Regardless of who applies for the use of the lot.
So when we have a SDL, we don't require a certificate of liability insurance because they go through that process. And my understanding is that when we do the John C. Fremont Days, I think they have liability insurance.
So they're
as well.
covering them.
So if they do something negligent, then, they would be held responsible. But, in any situation, somebody who wants to do litigation, they can sue, anybody that they want to.
But my recollection was, and I always thought that in fact, John C. Fremont Days was umbrellaing this, and so we wouldn't need to have anything unique here. I just wanted to be sure that in fact, that's the case. John C. Fremont Days is overarching here.
Is Elgin Fritz parking lot a public parking lot owned by
Yes.
the city?
Yes.
Then we should be requiring that we have additional listed as an additional insured on probably both John C. Fremont Days organization as well as the applicant.
So when we have, if it wasn't for John C. Fremont Days, we would typically have an agreement in addition to, but that agreement would be with John C. Fremont Days and not.
But we do send you a certificate. of
1 second.
insurance.
Okay. I haven't received that yet, I don't believe, but I will receive it. Okay.
So again, since we're going to have this on next meeting for all the rest of John C. Fremont Days. Yes, it'll be on the next council agenda.
So for the SDL, there's a 10-day, and I think we're within that. Approving it today would just give the applicant additional time to process their application with the state. And so by delaying that, it would put them.
Okay,
under-
so we could approve tonight based on council's recommendation that we approve this contingent upon receiving the requisite insurance.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? Comments from the public?
Sorry, yes, Roxy Kretzel, 1649 North Broad Street. I'm the owner of LA Fireproof Door Company. And we have done John C. Fremont Beer Garden throughout the last 5-6 years. Every year we do supply the city of Fremont with a certificate of insurance liability. It's just part of our process, doing coverage for the beer garden. We list other donors that supply us with like the trailers, a certificate, the city of Fremont, along with Signal 88, that type of thing. So, and we did put the request in for our liquor license, thinking that Barry had the closures on the same night of the agenda. I just think something happened with John C. I just like to get it done and out of the way early. I don't like waiting to the last minute.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any additional comments from council? Councilman Yerger.
I would make a motion to authorize a special designated license for John C. Fremont Days Beer Garden in the Ingle Fritz parking lot under the prerequisite that the appropriate insurance policy designating the city be included. And thank you for the fact that you've always been doing it anyway.
Councilman Legman,
Also,
cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Moving on to unfinished business. Item 15, ordinance 5616, approving a change of zone from R rural to light industrial, generally located 850 feet north of 32nd Street and 1,500 feet south of County Road T on the west side of Jaeger Road. This is second reading. Go ahead.
Mayor, members of the city council, this is the second reading of the request for this change of zone. It's associated with a change to the comprehensive plan and a conditional use permit for self-storage, both of which you approved at the last meeting. With that, I'd be happy to answer any additional questions.
Any additional questions? Thank you. Any comments from the public? Okay, seeing none, any additional comments from council? If there are none, I'd take a motion, hold second reading. Councilman Legman,
seeing none, I make a motion to hold second reading of ordinance 5616.
Councilman Yerger,
Second.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Okay, we'll now have second reading.
Ordinance of the city of Fremont, Nebraska, amending ordinance number 5427 as it pertains to the zoning map to rezone the property generally located on the west side of Jaeger Road, approximately 850 feet north of 32nd Street and 1,500 feet south of County Road T from R rural to LI light industrial, providing for repeal of ordinances in conflict herewith, providing for severability, and providing an effective date on second reading.
Okay, moving on to item 16, ordinance 5618, amending sections 11-614.02 to allow chain link fence up to the property line in a front yard. This would be second reading.
Again, Mayor, members of the city council, this is the second reading of this ordinance. Over the years, we've had a lot of conversation about fencing in the front yard, whether chain link fencing should be allowed or not. This proposal has been brought forward at the request of Councilman Jensen from one of his constituents who would like to do so. This would allow the Planning Commission to grant a special exception, and it sets out the requirements to grant that exception so that in certain instances, some people could have fences, chain link fences in their front yard.
Any questions for our planning director? Thank you. Any comments from the public? Okay, seeing none, any additional comments from council? Councilman Yerger.
There's a couple things about this change that I'm a little concerned about, and that has to do with, first of all, whether or not adjacent property owners are given adequate notice and whether or not their thoughts and approvals are necessary given to condition for granting an exemption. So in section, I believe it's E1 D1. I think there should be a standard there that says, and the adjacent property owners were provided adequate notice and have not presented any compelling objection. My thought process is that someone would be granted an allowance to put in a fence from all the way from their backyard to necessarily the public sidewalk in the front of their house, borders a neighbor's property, and they get absolutely no say as to whether or not they want a fence on their side of the property. They should at least get notice and an opportunity to speak. Wouldn't say that they would prevail, but they ought to at least have a chance to be heard. So I don't believe that you indicated that this isn't a zoning change, so they wouldn't really get notice, or they would. I'd like to insert that in that subparagraph as an amendment. And the other thing that I'm concerned about is that we're granting the Planning Commission the right to give special exemptions over the rights of City Council. Planning Commission is not the legislative branch of governance. City Council is. And we've been told repeatedly that we as council cannot grant exemptions unless they're specifically codified. But yet this resolution change would allow the planning commission, who is an appointed body, not an elected body, to overrule the zoning procedures that are established by this body. I don't find that to be acceptable to me. I think that the approving municipal code zoning authority should be the one that grants this approval. I'm fine if the planning commission wants to hear this and make a recommendation to council for or against. I think that's great. They can hear the citizen complaints or whatever with regards to whether they do or don't want a fence, and then make that recommendation. But I do think when it comes to changing UDC rules, those ordinances rest with this body. And so I would like to either change planning commission to council, or to change planning commission may recommend and council may approve a special exemption in that paragraph ED sub 1 or sub I. So those two changes I'd like to see made by this council before we pass this on. I'll offer those as amendments.
Could I suggest some language, Councilman Yerger, under E1D little I, maybe have it say that planning commission, or however you decide who's going to grant, the whatever body may provide notice and hold a public hearing to grant a special exception. That would ensure that we have the notice in place. And then I'll let you as a body discuss who should be granting it.
That probably would suffice with regards to the adequate notice, unless council, legal counsel feels we need more rationale based on how the planning commission would make a recommendation to delineate whether or not adequate objection had been, or compelling objection had been raised. They're probably going to need some sort of grounds to reject an application for variance, I suppose. Do we have to have anything in there, or they just have to give notice?
Well, I'll try to comment on several of the issues that
Okay.
I heard. Initially, I will tell you, when this came up, I'm like, planning commission can't do this. They're a recommending body. They can't do this. Well, then Travis got out statute. It says that they can do it. My only feeling on that, even though it's somewhat of an anomaly, is they probably, the state, when they passed, the legislature, when they passed this, probably said, this is such a nominal issue that it's not something that, if the council wants to delegate it to the planning commission, they can delegate it to the planning commission, so the city council doesn't have to deal with it. That was my reading of the statute anyway. So secondly, I do agree, though, if the planning commission is going to do that, or the city for that matter, that we would give the same, and I don't know what your regulation is, probably 300 feet. Or at least say that notice. not
Yeah,
only
the
hold a
state
public-
regulations for public notice are 300 feet.
Okay.
To notify, let's see, it's the 2 of the 3, we always do 3. Notify the property owners within 300 feet, post a sign and publish in the newspaper that there will be a public hearing. We always go 350 feet, just to be sure that we catch all of the properties, so we don't have to hold it up on an error. And we always try to do all 3 in case the sign gets blown down or the newspaper misses a day on publication or something, just to back us up and make sure that we have at least 2 of those 3.
So I don't see it, Pat. I don't see this as necessarily a zoning issue that would necessitate a 300-foot notification, but adjacent property owners that will have their property directly impacted by
If you-
somebody else's fence building is my concern.
No, I understand that. My thought process is you could go, I think it would be normal, if you will, to go as far as what the zoning is. Only from the standpoint is there may be reasons why an adjacent property owner has no objection to that. But the guy who pulls up to that stop sign every day and has to deal with the view obstruction may have an issue. But if you want to limit it to adjacent property owners, that's certainly your prerogative.
I yield to whatever legal and staff wants in that regard.
You can go either way on that. I'm just saying there may be somebody, and again, that may be the easiest way to do it is, if I'm correct, when you have a zoning issue, they have to provide the list, correct?
No, we
Oh, you even do it for
we do
them?
it.
You're
Yeah,
a nice
we do
city.
But it's, for consistency's sake, I would just ask that we do it this way so we don't have to think, oh, fences, we notify differently on that. We can just be consistent.
And so I think if that's the case, you could say, and provide notice consistent with zoning matters, then that'll reference back to whatever we approve for zoning matters. And it would be consistent for all notices that you send out.
Can I put some information out there? We did those zoning ones that are on the meeting for tonight, and I think you guys sent out 250 letters. I sent out 250 letters for each one of those actions. So you're talking about a couple $100, $300 to put out the notice for this fence question on each one of these would potentially happen. Could it just be a notice in the newspaper as opposed to letters going out? And not to mention staff time, sending out all of those letters for a fence issue.
Well, that's a call for the city council to decide, not me. But again, I'm just thinking out loud, those fencing matters can affect more than just adjacent landowners in a particular neighborhood. So it may be where two adjacent landowners don't care at all, but everybody else in the neighborhood says, I can't see getting out of the neighborhood if you put those fences up. So I think more notice is better than less. And you could attach a fee to request a special exception so that it will offset those costs.
We do include a legal publication notification fee along with all of our other application fees. We try and set that fee so that it evens out across the board for the mailing. Sometimes we don't have very many letters we have to send out. Sometimes we have a whole lot.
I think maybe the way to address this is that we could have a proposed amendment to the ordinance for third reading and just move this forward as is for now. And then have a proposed change. But I guess that would also indicate or would like to see some indication as to, or more debate anyway, with respect to, do we want to have the planning commission do this or do we not? From my standpoint, and it's a personal opinion, if I'm the city council, I'd rather not deal with it. I got enough things to deal with. So if we can allow the planning commission to do it, let's do it. But if you're saying, look, this is a legislative thing and that's what we do, we could change it to a recommendation from the planning commission with approval by the city council. But of course, now we're putting out another set of notices as well for that.
The city of Lincoln, there's a number of items that they allow their planning commission to approve, like special use permits. But they have a 10-day appeal period where any aggrieved party could appeal the action of the planning commission to the city council. We could add that as an amendment here also as a possibility, just throwing it out there.
I only wish that our code actually allowed for what you both have been describing here, because having been repeatedly told this council has no authority to amend its own code and give exceptions, and to grant that authority to an appointed body strikes me as more than odd. I would rather that first we have our own authority, and if we choose to give it to someone else, that's different. Then we don't have any authority, but they do.
I think the little bit of the difference on this is if you have an ordinance that doesn't provide that the council can make exceptions, then you can't make exceptions to that ordinance. But if you put in the ordinance that the city council can provide exceptions, then yes, very well, you can.
Right. And that's what I'm asking that we do here, so that in essence, we're the ones that have given that authority. But I'm happy if we want to move this to third reading with amendment. My only caveat in that regard would be is the amended language needs to be in the packet material, and not something that we do on the fly. We've now just said that we'll bring this into third reading as an
That's
amendment.
specifically why I want you to wait to make these changes so that we get the language and it's in the packet so that you have a clearer picture as opposed to trying to do amending on the fly today.
I agree. Thank you.
Councilman Jensen.
Yeah, when I first brought this over to her, that I suggested the planning commission doing it instead of the city council for that reason. It's a nominal issue. I'm trying to save the people an extra step, but if we're creating more staff time and creating more cost and making his fee for getting this special permit, we're making that more expensive by doing it that way. I don't care if this comes to council. I don't think it's going to happen 3 times a year. So it's really, if that's something we want to move in there, I've got no problem with that, Brad, or anybody else. Well, we can move this to second reading and then fix it for third.
Councilman Vaughn.
It's my understanding that different forms of fencing are already allowed to come up to the front of the property. I just don't understand the angst over chain link fence. You know, it was mentioned about visibility coming up to an intersection. I don't know of anything that's more visible fence wise than a chain link fence. And I think as long as they would go through the planning commission, I would be in support of leaving the language as is.
Councilman Ellis.
Jennifer, I liked your suggestion of putting something in our ordinance that would allow a protest to be filed on any planning commission decision that could then become before council. I don't know how that would look, where that would need to be placed. Is that in our ordinance that would need to be done? So. maybe
Yeah,
we-
I would do it with this because other than the waiver of landscaping and the sign plan, everything that the planning commission takes action on comes to city council.
So we could essentially change the ordinance so it would affect all of those. If any one of those that the planning commission can rule upon, there would be a 10-day period where anybody could file is that what you're saying?
On this specific item, I'm suggesting that we could add language for that 10-day period
Okay,
with either the update of the UDC, or we could take language now to the planning commission that would come back here on those other 2 items that would allow that appeal
Okay.
process.
I just like that idea, just to give the public an out if they need it. I don't know what that would look like. We could modify the ordinance this week to add that in here. Is that what you're saying?
For this item.
For this particular
For this
item?
particular item, the other 2.
And then the UDC
has to
could-
go all the way back through
Sure,
planning commission because that wasn't advertised.
sure.
So we can either do that
The manual
now,
way, yeah.
right? Or we could do it with the update of the UDC, depending on the urgency. you
Sure,
feel.
so we could modify the ordinance right now in next week to add that.
Mhm.
And then let the UDC take care of the rest of the stuff.
Yes, that
Thank
would
you.
be my preference.
Councilman Legman.
Yeah, if there are no other questions, then I'd like to make a motion to hold second reading of ordinance 5618 with the knowledge that we will make some changes so that we're not making changes on the fly again. I really like to have everything in writing with all the changes instead of just throwing things out. So that's my motion.
Councilman Yerger.
And I'd like to second Councilman Legman's motion. I would like to see if staff could clarify something that that was said just a moment ago with regards to fencing is allowed. Other kinds of fencing is allowed to the street already. I believe that to be inaccurate based on code changes that we made. Although chain link fence may be the issue here, we do not allow other fencing to go to the sidewalk. It goes to the edge of the house. Is that not a
That's
correction?
incorrect. It goes to the property line, not the sidewalk.
In the front yard?
Yep. You can have a wrought iron fence. in the
Stuff that you
front
can see,
yard.
stuff that you can see through, but we have special code. So you
You
can't just
can-
put any fence.
You can have up to 42 inches in the front yard of ornamental fencing, picket fencing, as long as it's 50% open, but not chain link fencing.
Okay, well, I'll still second the motion as proposed by Councilman Legband with the caveats as is with regards to third reading. And thank you for adding that, Mark.
Okay, cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Second reading, yes, we'll not have second reading.
An ordinance in the city of Fremont, Nebraska, amending Exhibit B of Ordinance 5427, specifically portions of the UDC Chapter 11 zoning subdivision and site development Exhibit B, providing for repeal of ordinances in conflict herewith, providing for severability, and providing effective date on second reading.
Okay, moving on to ordinance 5615, amending chapter 5, article 4 of the Fremont Municipal Code, sections 5-406, parking, business district hours prohibited, and 5-421, parking, public parking lots. This would be for second reading. We'll have staff report.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council, Jody Sanders, interim city administrator. What you see before you tonight is a proposed, an amended, I'm asking you to amend the ordinance that had previously been brought to completely remove section 5406 and just show the limiting of the parking in the area of downtown, as I understood that in 5-421, that would apply to all public parking places, for example, at the library, Clements Park, other areas. And we wouldn't want to allow overnight parking in those areas, but leave it designated into the downtown area. I will take any questions.
Okay. Councilman Jensen.
Sorry.
Councilman Yerger.
I don't have specific questions yet, but I would like to enter a couple of documents for the record.
Okay. Is there a second? That's a motion to receive. Is there a second?
Yes.
Councilman
And I'm
Ellis.
Keeping the 4 copies for this side.
Shut off for a second. Sorry. Councilman Ellis. Okay. Cast your votes to receive the document.
Oh, sorry, Councilmember Yerger, could you please vote? Thank you. Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
All right, go ahead.
Okay,
Councilman
several
Yerger.
days ago, I sent all council members a email with an attached draft of alternate language for these parking regulations in section 5406, also 5408, which was added from my previous discussion at the last council meeting, and section 5421. The reason for doing so is that there are, I think, several key things that we need to grapple with. One, we're trying to provide for downtown residential living parking space, both on the street and in parking lots, which will allow Fremont to be thrive and grow downtown with residential living. So obviously, I'm in favor of that personally. I would want the ordinances to make sure that we're facilitating that goal. So what I sent to you in your email attachment was the language, which was a red line version of the original code, not the code that was being sponsored by the interim city administrator, but the code as originally published. It has red line built into it now. And I put comments on the side to help explain why is any of this necessary or should be considered by council in making its decision on what to edit. There should be different sections here for public parking on the streets. That's 406. And retention of the daytime parking and addressing the overnight parking are 2 separate issues. We need to be able to maintain and enforce daytime business parking. Whether it's accomplished or not is one thing, but we need the authority to do it. We also need to be able to enforce overnight parking for general public versus overnight parking for residential dwellers or building owners, propriety owners, or a business themselves that's parking their commercial vehicles. I know the BID wanted to have that capability for those people to park in the street overnight. I've attempted to accomplish all of that in modifications to section 406, and the explanations were in the margin. With regards to section 408, which was the duties of the police chief, that section, after I got to looking at it, thanks to some comments and that I received from Ms. Sanders, was that We haven't really addressed or given any authority to community service officers, who are likely the most likely people to do traffic enforcement, not police officers. So this section definitely needed some revision anyway. So I fixed for those things, as well as tried to make sure that we didn't confuse what's in this authority in 408 with the authorities to enforce in sections 5, 406 and 421. Because 406 and 521 also authorize the superintendent of public services or the street department to make these same declarations to have vehicles moved. If they're in the way for emergency, for snow removal, they don't need a police officer to get you moved. They can take care of it. And 406 always did that. 421 did not. So I took the language that was in 406 and moved it also into 421 so that we have that same authority in streets and parking lots. Those were the essence of what the changes I'm recommending are for. And subsequent to our having some discussion about this at the last meeting, I did entertain some calls from businesses downtown that said, we really want you to retain daytime parking restrictions. 2-hour parking limits, we need to have those. We also need some protection if you're going to allow overnight parking for those vehicles to be gone when businesses open up in the morning. That is, they can't park there 24 hours a day. We have business clientele that we need to have the access to those parking spaces. Same kind of true in the covered parking area over at the Cabbage parking lot. Courthouse personnel use that. Business retail customers use that. And now we want 505 and other downtown dwellers to be able to use that as well. Utilizing an 18-hour parking maximum at least gives us some element of governance that you can pull in the afternoon at 4 o'clock and not have to leave till 10 o'clock in the morning. But that's generally going to be around the time that the courthouse opens up and businesses open up for retail. So if you just move within that window of space, you're fine. And on weekends, you don't have to move. But if you're allowed to park in and day out without ever moving, the citizens of Fremont's taxpayers will be providing private parking at public expense. And that's not our goal. Our goal is to accommodate residential dwellers and people that own businesses downtown to be able to park in front of their buildings and have their customers park in front of their buildings. That was the reason for my attempting to rewrite this. I'm sorry for the long-winded explanation. That's why I tried to write it down in advance. But I didn't hear back from any of the council members as to whether or not they had questions or not. So I would certainly like an opportunity to explain further if any of this wasn't understandable as to why these changes are more appropriate than what we're attempting to do. I hope the council finds that they are, and that we would either one of two things: substitute this right now for second reading language, or if you're not comfortable with that, then we could take an option of, for third reading, we have option A, which is the language sponsored by staff, and option B, which I have proposed here, which is a little more intensive with regards to allowing enforcement. So I'm open to either way. I'm interested in hearing from what council members think about the recommendations and the approach. Thank you.
Councilman Ellis.
You guys know this is near and dear to my heart. I have a business downtown, we definitely need something in place. I like, the unlimited parking, past 2 o'clock at night or in the morning to 6, of getting rid of that, letting somebody park there overnight. But I do believe the 2-hour parking, I know that our chief police doesn't really want to enforce that too much, but I think it gives the city some teeth. In order, if a car is abandoned, that, if it's been there for 2 hours, then they can prove to it. It's really interesting how life works out. This last weekend, we had the artisan market, and a Saturday morning got to the parking lot, and there was a 1972 Ford van sitting there with 1974 plates on it that had essentially been abandoned the night before. Called officers. First they thought it was a private parking lot. I had to convince them it was a public parking lot. And then they said because of the 2-hour requirement, yeah, we could move it. But if we didn't have a 2-hour requirement, they would balk at that. So they were able to get it towed away at the owner's expense. But So I do believe that there needs to be some sort of 2 hour, even if we don't enforce it, or if it simply just gives the police the opportunity to enforce it if need be. And I like the idea of maybe keeping the streets open at night and letting people park in parking lots overnight. That would help us with our snow removal and that kind of stuff. So I like some of the give and take here. I think we're honing in on some better solutions. That's not a huge, we're not in any big hurry on this. I think the 505 is not ready to have their first tenants until late August. So I think this is good to get the word out to the public of we're looking at it, we're making changes, and maybe could move forward slowly on this. So thank you.
Councilman Vaughn.
I'm slightly concerned about some of the comments that we had heard about Norfolk, I believe, and their similar situation and how they tried to put rules and caveats in there and found it to be an extraordinary, time commitment that wasn't worth their effort. And I like the existing language as it is because it's very simple and we're not fixing any problems that we haven't encountered yet. If we encounter problems down the road, we can address them at that time. This is very succinct and to the point, and it accomplishes what we need to do. And I would like to leave it as is.
Okay. Councilwoman Ganem.
Well, if we do change some things, it appeared to be not as clear as I would like to have it on section 5.4.21. When you say the overnight parking shall not apply to city-owned parking lots, okay, with that, nor to parking by property owners occupying a living space within the building or lease tenants occupying a living space within the business district. But we have people that lease the businesses because businesses are allowed to park. But yet you have businesses that they're not the owners. And so I don't know how to make that more clear. I do think there should be some kind of parking limit. I'm not sure about 18 hours. Because if I had a day off on in the middle of the week, I'd like to park my car and not go out for 24 hours and just leave there instead of having to move my car. Or eliminate it and make it 48 hours or 72 hours, and it just follows with the weekend as well. So that would be a concern that I had, or questions about the business tenants. And what about overnight parking with the businesses that may need someone to leave their car? We have the 505. If someone maybe, I know we wouldn't do that, but there might be a person that overindulges and probably should not get behind the wheel of their car and be taken home. So their car would be overnight. Maybe their friend could move it to one of the lots, but there needs to be some give and take and some reality checks because it will happen. I know it should be their responsibility. I understand that. They should make prior arrangements. I was always the designated driver, but not everyone does that. They don't think they're going to be the ones that overindulge, but they may. So those are some of the issues that I would like to bring forward to see if for discussion and what you may all think.
Councilman Sukram.
Yeah, I have to agree with some comments earlier about it, about trying to keep this as simple as possible without really getting so far overreached that we don't even know where we're at. However, I do agree with Councilman Ellis on having a little bit of a bite if we need to. So I think we should probably still try to keep it simple with a little bit of bite to it. So that's all I had.
Go ahead.
Mayor and council, I was a little confused on this because I was trying to find in the ordinance, or I should say in your code, the 2-hour parking requirement. And the confusion, I think, is under section 505-403, it says it can be fixed by a resolution. You actually have a separate ordinance, but it's never been codified, which is 3655. Looks like it was approved right before 5406 that lays out the 2-hour rule. But you have to dig and chase that. It kind of seems like the 2-hour rule ought to be in our code if that's what it is. We also refer to a residential parking area of 18 hours in our code. So I'm not sure why we're using that resolution and not codifying it for the 2 hours in the business district. That seemed a little odd to me. So I would suggest that we do that. I'm just looking at this, trying to decide, can we do that without kind of starting this process over? Because that would, in a sense, modify, I think, section 5403. I'm not positive of that, but again, I was trying to figure out where this 2 hours came from, and I just got a chance to talk with Ms. Sanders right beforehand. So that 2-hour thing, in my opinion, has got to be in the code. So Joe Blow or Jane Blow doesn't have to go digging to try to find where that came from. So that I definitely think that is in there, or needs to be in there. Outside of that, I guess I'm at least in the camp of trying to enforce all this stuff becomes somewhat of an enforcement nightmare. And that if you start out with a very, what I would say, somewhat simple process, other than fixing that 2-hour rule, and then as things develop and as we learn, we make modifications if necessary. This isn't set in stone for the rest of our lives. We can make changes then from that point on. As far as some of that language about local residents being able to do that, that to me is an enforcement nightmare. And that we've talked to the chief of police, and he doesn't want anything to that extent that he's got to figure out, well, is this a local person? Did they start renting? I think and I would agree with the chief, that's an enforcement problem. As far as the one with respect to 5408, which is about parking chief police powers, I think that's broad enough as it is. The chief of police, if I'm correct, oversees the police officers and what was it for the community service officers, or code enforcement officers. So I think that's probably broad enough to cover that. If you want to be more specifically, you certainly can, but anything that the police chief supervises, I don't think necessarily needs to be in the statute to sit, because the police chief can certainly delegate that authority. And that's really the only comments that I had.
I would just kind of add, I'll chime in here. I sat in the meeting with the BID, and we had I think we had a very good discussion on what they thought and some suggestions. I would kind of concur that, it is in this situation, we've heard a lot, we don't have a parking problem downtown right now. I mean, we're getting a lot more traffic downtown. It's great. But right now we have plenty of spaces to handle the traffic. Now that's going to, hopefully, this is what we all want, a downtown that is full of people. And then you go down to the old market or you go down to the Haymarket, it's a little harder to find spots because it's busier. There's lots of folks down there. So I would tend to agree that I do think having the 9 to 5 or the 2-hour parking just in there allows us to be able to enforce that if we need to. I would agree this is an enforcement nightmare for our chief. And the simpler, the better. I would tend to, and when we were with the BID, really, they were open to allowing the overnight parking in the downtown district, streets and parking lot. If we put a 2-hour limit on the streets from 9 to 5, And then we could put a max of 72 hours or whatever your max for your parking lots. That gives us the enforcement that we need in case we need it. And we're all complaint based anyway. So I mean, this really, if we receive a complaint, that's how this works. So how I see it is we allow overnight parking in the downtown district. That's streets, that's city parking lots. We still have the 9 to 5, 2 hour, which means if you're parked on the street and you parked overnight, there's still a 2 hour limit on those streets. And then we could put a max on the parking lots, just in case we have an abandoned vehicle that needs to be towed and we need to address. To me, that's simple, but allows us to have the enforcement that we need. And it gives us a start for us to move forward. Are there going to be things we're going to need to address after this? Probably in the next few years, maybe. I mean, this is going to have to be workable. I mean, it's a good problem to have, but right now we just need the basics. All right, I'll open it up to public comment. Okay, seeing none, again, additional comments from council. Councilman Yerger?
Well, I personally want to ask that two things. Based on what legal just had to say, maybe we're better off to sit on second reading rather than to try to move to third reading, do some further editing with regards to that and bring it back. So if we need to do any final editing at the next meeting, which might be minor, we still have a third reading to do it rather than to do it on the fly, which I know is difficult. So that's one option. The other thing that I would like to point out is that we have yet to give the public a bite at the proposed language that I've offered now for twice in these meetings because it never makes the public packet. So they don't get a chance to review other suggestions. One of the concerns that I have is that the covered parking garage has 76 stalls on the main floor covered. If all of the 505 people, as was suggested, 28 to 40 of those spaces go to their parking tenants, half of those parking stalls could be full, more than overnight. They could be full for days because we don't have any time limit restrictions. If the John C. Fremont Apartments gets up and running, maybe you'll fill up the rest of the parking spaces with nothing but downtown living tenants, and business customers won't have any place to park, and neither will courthouse employees. We're taking advantage of that covered parking today. I'm just trying to be long-term enough to realize that we don't have a problem today, and I agree with you. And it's complaint-driven today. It can be and would be complaint-driven tomorrow, but Chief Elliott has told me if you don't have anything in code that gives me the authority to tow or to ticket, I can't enforce a thing. It's so bad, and so we want to put enough in here to make sure that he can enforce upon a complaint. For example, when Mr. Ellis had to call and say, get this out of this parking lot, there were provisions to do it. Tomorrow, if you could park overnight in any parking lot, you couldn't have towed that vehicle, period. Legitimately parked overnight. So we have to be cognizant of what we're opening the door to. I'm sympathetic to all of these areas of parking need, but I am definitely sympathetic to the business owners, the property owners, the tenant owners, as Sally has pointed out, with regards to all of those people that own, lease, or occupy or have residential presence downtown need to be able to park in front of their buildings if they choose. That doesn't give you the right to park in front of everybody else's buildings and take up a whole block because those people couldn't drive home because they were too inebriated. And so the next day, the whole block of parking is tied up because those people didn't come back and move their cars and don't need to because we have no ordinance. So even though we don't have a problem, we don't want to open up a problem either. And I know that Norfolk was touted as having said they've got some issues they worked through, it was too complex. If you put something on the code that gives you the authority to do something, then it's a matter of whether you enforce on a ready basis. We don't have meter maids anymore that go up and down the streets and chalk your tires and do all of that on an hourly basis, and we probably won't. But if you don't have something on the books, law enforcement can't enforce anything. And that's what this is all about. The other thing I would point out is when we're designating parking in the streets, we have to be careful that we're not talking about the giant BID versus the BID that's more refined, which I mentioned in this code. Because some of these BID area in the large area are residential properties. You don't want to restrict their parking in front of their residence or their rental residence. So you need to narrow the true business district to something smaller than, which is part of the red line that you see here, is to define the area where you would put up this signage for restricted parking. Because for parking in the streets, you wouldn't want to restrict those people. So we don't want to create problems for them either with regards to overnight parking or restricted daytime parking. So you need to define the area. So I think if you read some of what was being proposed, you'll see what was really trying to be attempted there. I encourage you to consider that. I would very much like to have this offered by legal with regards to the rewrite, and to put this into either one blended rewrite or a straightforward, simplified, here's a quick and dirty approach, and here's a more comprehensive approach to redline, and we put that in the packet for second reading. And I make a motion to do that. To hold this off to second reading and make all these adjustments and put it as an AB option. That's fine.
If I may just make a comment in that regard, I still don't see why we can't have a second reading. And if things look good enough to prove it on third reading, then we approve a third reading. Otherwise, we proceed with holding off third reading for final approval, because it may be very well that there's a consensus that whatever we put into the agenda, or with some very minor tweaks as opposed to large tweaks, that we could approve it in 2 weeks. But if we don't vote today, even though we have consensus next week or 2 weeks from now, we can't pass it unless you then also do a waiver of 3 readings. So my suggestion would be we move forward on the second reading. If necessary, we don't move forward on a third reading.
Councilman Vaughn.
That was going to be my motion, exactly as legal had described.
Okay, got one more in the queue here. Councilman Legban.
Yes, don't we already have something that has a little bite that the police, and I guess this is directed toward the city administrator, the temporary city administrator for now. Don't we already have something with some bite that we could have vehicles removed? Don't we already have that?
I'm not an attorney, but based on my understanding, that's what's currently in section 408,
Okay.
where the police chief does have the ability to order the removal of any vehicle.
Okay, then knowing that, I'll second it as soon as Mr. Ellis is done then.
Okay, Councilman Ellis.
Legal, you mentioned that we might have to start over because we're making changes. We want to codify the 2 hour. What was that concerning?
The reason why I say that is you have another section in the same code area that references that it can be done by resolution. And I haven't been completely sure of that as I'm looking at it, because I think the reason why that's in there is it's anticipating that if you need to do something quick and fast, you can do it by resolution instead of ordinance. But it appears to me that we did an ordinance that we didn't codify. So I'm trying to decide whether it matters, whether we go ahead and codify those hours without changing other ordinances that we're not referencing. But then we also have the general language that we always put in ordinances that says, and repeal or partly repeal any ordinances that are in conflict herewith. So I'm thinking that we're probably going to be okay to put the 2 hours in there and indirectly modify the other ordinance. But my concern is, and again, I've figured out where these 2 hours came from 10 minutes before the meeting. I'm trying to figure out whether we are going to have to go back and reread because of how much we're changing. My general feeling is we're not going to have to, but I don't want to come to that conclusion after a 10-minute reading.
Okay, so Councilman Yerger, you had a motion on.
Yes, I did have a motion on the floor prior to another motion being made. So And I want to be clear that if I understand the comments that were just made by legal with regards to what's included currently in 5406 in the document that I sent out. The opening sentence says Monday through Saturday during the hours of 9 to 5, the business district on-street parking is limited to 2 hours. That's not going to be adequate to codify an ordinance. Parking is restricted to 2 hours. We need something else.
No, I'm just trying to figure out why we have this separate ordinance that
In addition to
we're treating the
406.
resolution in addition to 406.
I see.
So, and again, that just came up recently. And I guess I'm just looking at 406, and comments you made, we have a smaller business district that we're restricting to 2, no, let's see, 406 has it from 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. So that's all the business district. And then I think you're putting in language that says 2 hours in the smaller district because it's defined.
Well, I hate to get clear off track here, but if we need to reclarify for legal and for counsel, 406 attempts to limit on-street parking during the day, first of all, during 9 to 5 to 2 hours. That's what we have today. Business owners have told me that's what they want to keep. At least some business owners want that 2-hour parking. Then we want to allow overnight parking from 2 to 6 a.m. But we have to be careful in what areas we restrict that, because if we're not careful, we'll restrict areas that are residential properties, not downtown business streets. So we don't want to be really broad business districts. We want to be narrowly defined. And that's what those parameters attempt to do, is take those spaces that would be residential out of the standard business district that we normally talk about. But that's all about street parking, 406.
Yeah, I don't mean to interrupt you, Councilman, but if I'm reading 406 right now, it just talks about the early morning parking from 2 a.m. to 6. I don't see, as I read your code online, that it says anything about 2 hours.
No, I'm talking about the red line that I put into the
Okay.
record that I sent to Travis and all council members and mayor.
I thought you said 406 currently.
No,
reads
as I currently submitted to all council
Okay.
members before the meeting.
Okay. I just caught that currently it reads as.
Oh, no, it's not in there currently. I added it. Okay, so I resurrect my original motion here to, and I guess I don't care whether we go to second reading now or third reading. What I want personally is for there to be some sort of consensus by council that we can take more than one version of this to the next reading, so that the public has an opportunity to read what we're debating rather than listen to the audio. I think they deserve an opportunity in the business district and the residential areas down there to weigh in on this issue. And they're only getting one side of the argument with regards to how do we impose something here, not be overly restrictive, but something that can be complaint driven that we can enforce if we need to. If we take out too much enforcement, we can't enforce a thing. And that's what the chief of police has told us. And Mr. Ellis's example is a classic one, because 408 today does not give the authority to the police chief to deal with anything more than the streets. It doesn't say parking lots, but they towed out of a parking lot. So we would need to fix the authority. 406 already has that authority because the street department, the police chief can do all of that already. And 421 didn't have it, but was added to. So we've got it in 3 places. Yes. And so they can enact it upon complaint in any of those circumstances. And I think that's good protection.
Maybe to address your issue and about the public not seeing your comments, this was a little bit confusing to me as I was going over the agenda with Travis, because my understanding was that some policy or sort was set up that whoever's offering it offers it and can then also show amendments to it. But I don't know why any council person can't say, please put this in addition into the packet and see my changes, and so that the public would also see your changes. My understanding is that it's for some reason that changed recently, and I don't know why that would be, or why you couldn't have requested the clerk to say, here's a version that I would rather put in with my changes. It would be beneficial to the public as well as the council.
Legal, I've been told more than once that an agenda item belongs to the person putting it on the agenda. and other council members or other members of the public through their council can't add materials into the packet on an agenda item that they didn't originally sponsor. If that's not accurate, I'd like that stated for the record.
I don't know.
Because I did attempt to go that way. At this meeting, I did ask Jody, would you consider blending these together or at least offering them jointly so that the public would have an opportunity to see a couple of choices? But we were past the Wednesday cutoff time. It's actually Tuesday for a Wednesday release. We were past that deadline. And we were going to be past any deadline that I could do it, but I couldn't do it anyway because it wasn't my agenda item. So I did try to go that route so that we could get it into the packet. It just wasn't available to do it that way. And so for this next round, I definitely like for that to be put out there so that the public can see all options.
Well, again, I don't know where that's written. I understood, at least from what Travis and I's discussion is that some of the city council wanted to discontinue doing that, or I don't know, because obviously I haven't, Travis has been holding most of the city council meetings, but if somebody wants to propose a change to an ordinance, I don't have any issue with it being in the packet because that gives the rest of the public a right to look at it and see what you're proposing. I don't think it would come up very often anyway, so I'm not sure what the big issue would be. But again, I'm just offering you my opinion. You guys dictate how you operate your council.
So I just want to remind us, I mean, we're all trying to get to the same goal here. I mean, we're trying to help improve our parking downtown. We're trying to address a good need. We have overnight parking issue, I mean, I don't, we're veering off track and we're getting really far in the weeds where, what do you want to do? Do you want to have second reading on what's proposed? And then we'll work on additional details that we've discussed and bring a completed one forward that you can debate and amend and that addresses the needs? I mean, or do you want to continue this? I mean, you need to make a decision here. I mean, we are the body to make decisions. So we gotta, we're at the point now where we need to either continue this or we need to go to have second reading with the expectation we're going to come back with a revised version that we can debate and we can make a decision on and move forward with this issue.
Let's move with Councilman Vaughn's suggestion that we move and add the other options into the next reading for a third reading as council suggested. I'll yield to that approach. I'll just make sure that we get it all in for review.
Okay. Councilman Vaughn, is that motion still on the table then?
Yes, that's correct.
It would be to hold second reading with the expectation that the changes are included into the third reading packet. Is that clear? Okay. Councilman Jensen?
I'll second that.
Okay. Cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Okay, we'll have second reading.
An ordinance of the city of Fremont, Nebraska, amending chapter 5, article 4 of the Fremont Municipal Code, repealing all ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict with this ordinance, providing when this ordinance shall be in full force and effect on second reading.
Okay. The time is 8:59. We'll take a 10-minute break.
Yeah, they need to get together. That's just crap. Still giving a liquor license to people downtown. Way back when I was in my 30s. So if they got that from when they said, "Let's get rid of them," they got some sort of. They're giving them they can't, they don't. That's the whole you can also kick it. I don't think so. I'll stay here, so don't have to go to the bathroom. Yeah, yeah, I don't. I just said. It's like real.
He lives next door.
It's 2 hours. I haven't seen that. 2 hours. That's it. But you know what? I think
Yeah,
This guy. I just had one. Next year.
Well, we're gonna be doing it again. Well, we think we are. We have to make sure we can get everything together to do it. If not, this year. But he mentioned something, Carol mentioned something about rainy to the detriment of the map. We have to. I'll get more information, like substandard area, I think just the downtown area, because that's where the TCR, the revitalization. I think that is on.
Then make your. Take further out. Be a lot better, because that would give us 8 foot put it right.
Yeah, we can figure out exactly what you're saying.
This thing.
It
about
was the area that was
putting
lighted
oats in there, I don't see what's good. If they think that they're, that thing is gonna fill up. with
And
water,
Melissa from Main Street can help
you know,
us.
it's gonna come right back.
Whatever their area is,
So,
that's where
I
they'll
just,
sit.
I just.
They kind of manage.
You're the top thing.
Yeah, I'll bring the file down for you. Yeah. If I can get it back.
But they can't put, they can't.
Bunch of
put-
commissioners applied for what last time. Like, we could- Yeah, sure. Because.
When they bought that land, the rest of the community was like,
That's so true. Yeah.
because that was. County yards,
Let's go. Where would you guys go? Anywhere? No. This was your idea. Right. Yeah, I should have dinner with friends one night for dinner. And I had lunch with another friend of mine down in Lincoln on Monday. So, you know, just good, relax. How about
I
you?
know.
It was nice. We usually go to town.
Before they get anything.
To where my dad was. He wasn't feeling well, so we didn't go.
So there was no first day.
Well, there was one during COVID that we didn't go to, but it was kind of nice.
Yeah, it's nice to have
And they just, we just moved like a year ago, so we're still like, you know, fine tune things that are.
We moved. It was 3 years ago, and we're still.
Oh, I know, we will, because I'm
I
just.
got a little place you can-
We finally were getting the exterior of our house painted.
Oh, well.
And the interior is still.
One time.
Yeah. It's fine. It's, you know, it's fine.
But as far as having a basement, like 6 by 6.
That's the word.
I went down there.
Kind of there too. Unfortunately, we have a-
Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask about that.
It is like full. I'm just like, and I told my husband, I'm like, I can't. Our homes in the kitchen.
What is it?
Said if they wanted some more decorative stuff, put that up. It's a relatively small house and a relatively large lot. Which is exactly what his neighbor across the street has.
We're gonna have lakefront property, now they just put a dam out there. So I can't- Yes, it's a nice little. It is.
So you have to work on your version of the parking downtown. I'll have to work on my version of the parking downtown. It's allocated orders. So we'll put 8 on the agenda. Put it up simple. Make it fit
All right, go ahead and get started again. So we make our way back. All right, we'll move on to new business. Item 18, resolution 2022-090, approving the occupation of the public right of way at 349 North Main Street, 505 Brewing. We'll have staff report.
Good evening, Dave Godikin, Director of Public Works. I received a request from the property owner of the 505 Brewing, 349 North Main Street. with a request to have an outdoor seating area in front of their establishment. They sent me drawings of what the layout would be. Those are in the packet. The picture that's in there is an example of how theirs would look. Would be similar to the old Jay's Restaurant and the wine experience downtown. And it would accommodate seating outdoors for patrons. So this is a request for permission to occupy that city right away.
Any questions for staff? Councilman Vaughn?
Hey, Dave, I understand that there's existing precedent as far as other establishments downtown, but I noticed that in the picture where the outline is, it appears that there's a pretty significant bottleneck right there. And I'm wondering if there's ADA compliance, how wide do you need a sidewalk to be for ADA compliance or something to that nature?
If you look on the drawing, the first drawing, there's a in the lower right-hand corner, there's a dimension called B that shows that angled piece there. So I spoke with them and the agreement is the very outside of that fence. So basically the outer edge of the fence that would be on the sidewalk side, the pedestrian side, could be no closer than 4 feet to where the bricks are. So there has to be 4 feet of sidewalk concrete area. And I believe the ADA requires 3 feet. So we're allowing even more than that. So there would be room to take a wheelchair or anything through there.
Okay, great. Thank you, Dave.
Any other questions? Thank you. Comments from the public? Okay, seeing none. Any additional comments from council? Councilman Legband.
If there are no more comments, I would like to propose approving resolution 2022-090.
Okay, there's a couple, Councilman Jensen.
I was going to second unless there's some more comment.
Okay, Councilman Yerger.
I just had one question, if you wouldn't mind, it has to do with snow removal. So who's responsible for snow removal on the public streets? The building owner or the lease tenant or the city? So who's going to scoop inside the fenced areas? That's my question. Building owner is responsible? Okay.
Okay, Councilman Jensen, is your second still? Okay. Cast your vote.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Moving on to item 19, motion to approve interlocal mutual aid agreement for building inspections. Go ahead.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. This is a request for you to approve the interlocal agreement. The other communities have already approved the agreement. This came about, we've been nearly 6 months without a chief building official. We're borrowing our electrical inspector from the utilities department on a part-time basis. So we basically had one guy doing everything. We did have the contract with ITBS to do some remote inspections. But I had contacted Washington County to see if they could help us out, and they did, free of charge. They did some building inspections for us, and while Calvin was on jury duty, they were able to fill in and do electrical inspections. They have a certified electrical inspector, which is one of the toughest ones to find because of the state requirements. Through this process, Douglas County provides services to electrical inspections to Valley. They've helped out UTAN with some inspections. We helped out UTAN in the past. Don Simon did some training for the building official in UTAN a few years ago. Washington County is short on inspectors. They have one inspector. Valley has one inspector. This just provides us an opportunity to share with each other. We're not obligated, but it just formalizes an ability to share. So if an inspector is sick or goes on honeymoon like Rune in Valley, we've got people we can call and see if we can get some backup. And then during the flood, we had a contract with Lincoln and we actually paid them And when you have a big event like that, that may end up having to be the case. But this provides us with a great group of communities that we can build relationships and help each other out. I'd be happy to answer any questions. And our new building official, Mark Bird, is here. I've talked through with him. If you have any questions for him, he's able to answer those as well.
Any questions? Councilman Yerger?
Well, I definitely see the need. We've had it for quite a while. My questions really are just, each area has different inspection criteria. There are certain federal standards, probably state standard too, I suppose, and then we have local, right? So do these inspectors that come in from other locales to assist, and when we go to their locales to assist, is the expectation is that we understand and are certified in any of these different codes, or do we need to be certified in anybody's different codes? And is that all part of this package of we're all certified in every one of these people signed on the interlocal?
Most communities have adopted the international codes. Some communities, and Fremont is one of them, has made some amendments. We work with each other and talk through that. Like I said, electrical inspectors are the most difficult. The state requires for an electrical inspector that you be a journeyman and that you pass certification test and that you're certified by the state. So that one is particularly challenging. And again, you're pretty much following similar codes. Again, there have been some exceptions. I know when talking about plumbing codes, for example, our codes are different than what they're doing in Omaha, but the inspectors have been working together to try to make sure they understand what those differences are. And maybe Mark can answer some of those questions. I know that, for example, for electrical inspections, Calvin had been involved in some big ones at Holstone Farms, and he was able to do those after hours. He wanted to continue doing those. And the electrical inspector from Washington County absolutely agreed with that. He didn't want to jump in the middle of anything. So really, this is about relationship building and helping each other out, and then having those communications to understand what those differences would be.
It's all a great idea. I don't have any problem with that. I just remember Mr. Simon telling us before when he went to do work in UTAN that different locale, different set of rules in some cases, et cetera. And just because there are systemized standards, there are different releases of those standards. I thought he told us at one time, and we might be on version 12 and other people are on version 10 and somebody else on version 14, and we haven't yet upgraded to this version. And so you're inspecting to the code you have currently adopted. Is that not correct? Or is my thinking and recollection wrong from what Mr. Simon might have told us in the past?
I think most of the communities have similarly adopted codes, but again, where there are those differences, the inspectors talk through all of that. And maybe Mark, I don't know, has a different answer to that.
I'm just hopeful that they
But-
can all deal with all the variances and this all
Yeah.
works with
And-
the
and
slicker
I-
and a whistle, because that's what we need is have these extra inspectors.
And this isn't intended to be anything but a stopgap. Can you fill in and help me out a few times this week? Nothing permanent, long-term continuing. And I don't know, Mark, do you want to come up? Has everybody met Mark?
No.
This is Mark Bird, our new chief building official. And I'll let maybe him answer some of those questions.
Thank you. Nice to meet you all. Mark Bird, 3147 Applewood Drive. Yeah, I think I appreciate Jennifer's work with this. She's been at it for a couple of months to put this together. I just found out about it a few days ago, so I haven't had a chance to speak with the other building officials in the surrounding community. But I would say that I would view this as a tool in the toolbox. I would not expect to use this on a regular basis. I would expect to use it for emergencies. Reading the mutual aid agreement, there's a lot of well, it's seems like it's very flexible. There's no payment, there's no requirement that we inspect for anyone, they inspect for us. It's just kind of an authorization that we could bring someone in from another jurisdiction if we needed to. And I could certainly see the job she's been doing, wearing several hats for several months. I could see the genesis for this. I appreciate all her hard work, but now that I'm here, I would certainly view it as not a standard practice that I would want to do unless it was a last resort.
Thank you and welcome.
Thank you.
Glad you're here. Councilman Jensen.
Yeah, I like that approach. I think this is a good idea. Like we said, just another tool in the belt, not something we're going to do all the time. Did I understand you correctly that everybody else has signed off on this already? And it's just our turn?
It's our turn.
No, thank you.
Okay. All right. Okay. Any comments from the public? Any additional comments from council? If there are none, I'd take a motion in regards to this item. Councilman Gibson.
Make the motion.
Councilman Yerger.
Second his motion to approve the interlocal agreement.
Okay. Cast your votes.
The motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Okay, item 20 is a resolution 2021-091 awarding the proposed Keno grants.
Good evening, Angie Olson, Grant Coordinator. The Keno Grant Fund has been established to support community betterment projects in Fremont. And the Mayor's Keno Advisory Committee met last May 10th, 2022 to review the 5 applications that were received by the April 1st deadline. Last October, we awarded $37,500 in Keno grant awards. And this is the second tranche of those funds. There were $12,500 to award. And you'll see in your packet the details of the recommended award amounts. And I'm here for any questions.
Questions for staff? Thank you. Any comments from the public? Okay, seeing none, any additional comments from council? Councilman Legband.
Yeah, again, I'd like to thank you for your work. I don't know where she disappeared to, but this was not taken lightly. We put in a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of considerations for these grants. And I think everyone did a real good job of working things out where everybody got a little something. I know not as much as everybody wanted, but everybody got something. So again, thank everybody for their effort in this.
No other comments? I'd take a motion. Councilman Jensen.
I'll make the motion to approve resolution 2022-091.
Okay. Councilman Legband.
I'll second that.
Okay, cast your votes.
The motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Item 21 is resolution 2022-092 authorizing the mayor to sign professional services agreement to provide construction and engineering services for the Rawhide Trail Fremont project between the NDOT and JEO Consulting Group, Inc. Off staff report.
Yes, this is Dave Godick, Director of Public Works. Sorry. This is the professional services agreement for the final stage of the Rawhide Creek Trail project. The Department of Transportation is administering this project. We have hired JEO Engineering to do the construction inspection on this project. And this agreement is between the state, the city, and JEO to provide those services. The contractor on this project is K2 Construction out of Lincoln. The estimated cost for the construction engineering is $217,170.41. The city share of that is 20%, which would be approximately $45,000.
Any questions for our Public Works Director? Councilman Legband.
Did I hear you right? This is the final professional agreement, right?
I certainly hope so.
I certainly hope so too. It's been a lot of years coming and it's been a lot of work and now it's getting to be a lot of money, but I'm glad it's finally, hopefully coming to an end.
Yes, the contract has been let and the anticipated start date is early to mid August on this project, and it will be constructed this construction season.
Any other questions? Thank you. Any comments from the public? Seeing none, take a motion in regards to this item. Councilman Legband,
Yes, I would like to make a motion to approve resolution 2022-092.
Councilman Sukram,
I'll second.
cast your votes.
The motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Item 22, resolution 2022-093 of the City Council of the City of Fremont, Nebraska to approve change order number 2 for Lincoln Avenue and 29th Street paving project. Now have staff report.
Dave Codican, Director of Public Works. This item is to authorize change order number 2 to the Tech Park project. The city has a contractor on board doing construction out there right now. Due to changes in the project, pandemic issues, labor issues, et cetera, the project carried over from last year into this year. One of the issues that we're dealing with is supply chain issues. In this particular case is water main supply. So this change order does 2 things. It extends the time to finish the project into this year, gives them 70 days starting a week ago, Monday, May 7th, whatever it was. And pulls out the water main items out of the contract from the contract that we have with Young Construction, and then we will bid out the water main separately.
Okay, any questions? Okay. Thank you. Comments from the public?
Yes, I have some documents to enter into exhibit.
Okay. Take a motion to receive. Councilman Yerger.
Motion to receive the documents.
Okay, Councilman Legband.
I'll second that.
Okay, cast your votes. These are all the same, so.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Go ahead.
Okay, my name is Elaine Evans. I live at 2741 Laverna Street. And the reason I am speaking again has to do with the ordinance to pay the bill for the Rawhide Creek detention cell. The work is not completed and the residents along the west side of Laverna Street are not pleased. We were told PVC pipe was going to be installed for drainage and it hasn't been done. The civil engineer has said that the work that has been done is totally incorrect. It does not follow what was ordered, nor does it follow the laws regarding development of properties adjacent to it. There is an unsightly mess of silt block and steel posts. Most of the residents themselves have cleaned it up. Some are unable to open their gates. Why are we paying for a job that is incomplete? Thank you.
Okay, any other comments?
Jerry Delaney, 2940 Laverna Street. As Elaine said, it's our understanding that a portion of this agenda item is approving payment to the contractor for their supposed completion of their work so far. Part of that being the completion of the Tech Park retention pond. And as she said, contractors are typically not given final payment until all of the work in the contract is complete. And no one here expects each of you on the council to go out and look at each site and each job like this and make sure that all the details of the contract have been completed before you are asked to approve these final payments. You rely on information provided to you by city officials. And we're not sure exactly what information you've been given, but I and those that live in the 27 homes that back up to the Tech Park retention pond can assure you that it is not complete. A few examples. The silt fencing and posts along the east edge of the retention pond have not been removed by the contractor. In some places, portions of the silt fencing actually lay in the backyards of homeowners. In other areas, the fencing has been either partially or completely buried by the berm, which is part of the retention pond. If one looks down the line at the barrier silt fencing, the leaning fences, the dirt in people's backyards, it's obvious that the berm exceeds beyond its original intended boundaries, and final grading by the contractor is absolutely nowhere near complete. This not only affects the neighboring private properties that are being intruded on, but it leaves an unmaintainable piece of property along that berm that the city's going to have to maintain forever. So that's going to be your problem for many, many years to come if this isn't wrapped up before you okay payment to them. We're also told by previous administration that there was to be a culvert that would be installed on the north end of the retention pond to allow drainage out into the ditch that runs east and west along the north side of 32nd Street. That culvert does not exist. With recent rains, there's standing water in the midsection of the retention pond and none on the south end. If you're familiar with the retention pond design, the majority of the water is designed to roll to the south end of it and eventually out through a culvert into the Rawhide Creek. If the current water in it is sitting in the middle of it, that tells me that there's not proper sloping to the bottom of that pond, that it has not been finished yet. Also, on a short walk along the berm yesterday, I find areas with chunks of concrete 6 to 8 inches in diameter. The city has to mow that forever. That's going to damage your equipment if the contractor doesn't clean up things like that. These are just observations that I made yesterday during about a 15-minute walk down that area. But in the short time that I spent there, it was very, very, very obvious to me that that project's nowhere near complete. You can't really amend your agreement with them and agree them to pay for what they've done so far when they have not completed what they supposedly have done. Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay. Any additional comments from council? Councilman Yerger?
Well, I do have some, based on the pictures that we've been provided and the statements that have been made, I would ask Dave with regards to this work, which encompasses a statement that the detention cell area has been completed and now we're making these other adjustments in a change order. They would certainly give indication that even though the asserted statement is this work on the detention cells done, is it in fact done and ought to be paid for complete? That's my first question.
No, the project is not complete. There's a lot of work to be done out there.
Well, it
yet.
says to date, the detention cell has been completed and the process of the infrastructures are in place. So
Well,
that doesn't
The
indicate that the
detention
project.
cell is there and it's completed, but there's a lot of grading work yet that needs to be done, like back of curbs. They got to do grading to grade up to the back of the curb. This is by no means closing this project up.
Okay.
They got 70 days of work left on this project. And the issues that we're talking about, the silt fence, yeah, that has to be addressed and it will be addressed with the contractor. We go out and do inspections and they were notified last week that they have work to do over there.
Okay, well, I was one of the council members that went out and looked at the project after the mayor said he had been out, and we were admonished by council to go out and take a look at what was going on out here, and I did. And I have to honestly say, which kind of goes to the comments I made about the Deerfield developer earlier, trying to be the good neighbor. We own this property, the detention cell. We're not particularly being a good neighbor to the residents in this area, even though we went through some arduous process to replat and to change things so that we could make the detention area bigger, hold more water, so we would have less flooding potential. And that all may have been originally designed of sorts in the engineering plan. I think what got omitted from analysis was the fact that they pushed this berm all the way up to the east side boundary line and may have encroached on the easements. And I don't know what the setback requirements for building I don't know, a 4-foot tall berm on top of city easement are necessarily, but what we created is a backyard drainage problem for these people because their water can no longer drain from their backyards into the farm field, which it did originally, because now we have bermed up their backyard against their fence lines with no way to channel the water to any place. That seems to be, which is why I was interested in Mr. Sullivan's comment about do no harm or water runoff or whatever. We have entrapped their water, which wasn't entrapped before, potentially making a worse situation for them than before. And although I don't oppose to paying these people for the work that they have performed, they've performed the work according to the engineering designs they were given. Unfortunately, I truly believe the engineering designs that they were given by the city should have had those detention areas located further west. That is, the eastmost boundary of the berm should have been further west. The berm should have been lower, so it didn't create a visual disruption and as much of a water containment problem and a mowing problem and being an encroachment on their fence properties. We should have moved that to the west, could have easily have done it without an outlot B option. We could have just said, you're not done grading, take some more dirt out of the west side and move that over a little bit because we need to drain water off of their lots. I would hope that before, we won't do it tonight as a part of this payment, but I would entertain that we ought to have another change order forthcoming and an engineering design plan that reconstructs that east berm area to make this more compatible with the residences and make sure that we can drain their yards. Because otherwise, we as a city has caused their problems to be worsened by what we just did at Tech Park.
Well,
And that shouldn't happen.
I omitted that part earlier. There will be change orders coming yet.
To do as I just described with regards to moving the
We'll
detention area.
either
over.
remove the berm or we will put tubes in there to drain the backyards. I've been through there and looking just from the road, right after heavy rains. There's not an ocean of water back there. The water does flow. It's just that the backyards kind of do this. It flows to the north. But, at the fence lines, there's high spots and there is water that's trapped that way. We have surveyed it. We have talked to the contractor, or we'll do it with city forces one way or another. We will either put tubes in there or we will just flat out remove the berm.
Are those two tubes run into the detention
They
pond?
will
And then
run
are
into
they
the
like
detention
capped so
cell.
they can't backflow or? how
They
does that
will either
work?
run into the detention cell or it will run north or south and tie into the tubes that are out there already. There's a tube at the north end that it's always been there, drains into that 32nd Street ditch. And there's a tube down at the south end at, 27th Street that drains into the Rawhide Creek. So there are tubes that we could tie into.
So
as
that will
well.
come as an additional change order for
Yes.
additional detention area work to
Yes.
which the residents will be able to speak, even though we're going to pay them for the work in this change order for what they've done to date.
No, this change order does not pay them. It just takes the water main work out of the contract and sets the number of working days that they have this year to do the work.
Maybe I was misreading your statement about this work is done, not taking this
Well,
into account. We're just taking these three
When I say the
modifications.
work is done, I mean, I don't mean it's final, because there's still seeding that we have to do and that type of thing, but they've physically gone out and dug the pit. And if we remember when we go back, originally when we looked at that pit, it was a 100-year pit, then it was a 20-year pit, then it was a 100-year pit. Then we were going to have lots that were going to abut set between Buckingham and the detention cell. Then we took that out, made that an outlot, then we put that back into one lot. So originally, when we looked at the detention cell, we were trying to keep it as far east as possible so that we had room to develop that vacant land that sits in between there. And then the berm has been there forever. I mean, it's been on the design plans that were provided by the original consulting engineer. And it wasn't a berm to hold water. It was a visual barrier, let's say, even though it's not very tall. It's just so you're not looking off the backyard into a pool of water. So it doesn't provide necessarily a barrier for water. It provides sort of a visual.
I don't want to get us off track with regards to your change order. So if the payment for this work so far isn't part of this, we're just changing those three items and you're bringing a new change order, they can bring their complaints or their suggestions at that time when
That's correct.
Thank you.
Brad, can you shut off, please?
Yes.
Thank you. Councilwoman Ganem.
Actually, you answered most of my questions already through Councilman Yerger. Just to be clear, they're not being paid for work they have not done or completed at this point. And they will be paid later on for the work. They were just changing the order of things that they will be responsible for, correct?
That's correct. This is a unit cost type project, so there's so many square yards of concrete, there's so many cubic yards of fill, there's erosion control, et cetera. They get paid for each and every item based on the quantity that they place. So we never final the project out or final the bill out until the actual final payment of the project.
Thank you.
Councilman Vaughn.
If there is no other conversation, I would move to approve resolution 2022-093.
Okay, Councilman Ligban.
I'll second that.
Okay, cast your votes.
Councilmember Yerger, I did not get your vote. Thank you. The motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Okay. Moving on to item 23, motion to approve the appointment of the city administrator as appointed by the mayor. It is my honor tonight to bring forward Jody Sanders as our new city administrator for the city of Fremont. When we started this process looking for a new city administrator, we had a good amount of applicants, almost 30. Those that met minimum qualifications, there's those that had governmental experience. I interviewed personally, Zoom call with our HR director. There were 8 of those. And now I set up a mayor's committee as well after that to interview the finalists, which Ms. Sander was one of those finalists. I also had a city council involved in the mayor's committee. We had 2 members of the city council as well as 2 members of the public on the mayor's committee, which interviewed our finalists. And then I decided after that Jody Sanders would be my choice for city administrator. Jody has been with the city 14 years, director of finance. She has served as our interim city administrator for, almost 6 months now. Really brings a great background, is from Fremont, born and raised. And I'm really excited again to be able to bring forward her appointment tonight as city administrator. And I would ask for your vote and approval of Jody Sanders as our new city administrator. So I'd take any questions. Councilman Yerger.
At this time, I would make a request to go into executive session to have an opportunity to discuss issues related to this appointment request.
Okay. I need the language if we're going to do that. Okay, so you want to read this, please?
I move we go into executive session for the purpose of discussing the city administrator appointment and the subsequent contract item, and for further reason that the executive session is necessary for the protection of the public interest.
Okay. Is there a second? Councilman Ellis? Okay. A motion has been made and seconded to go into executive session for the purpose of discussing city administrator appointment and pending contract, and for the further reason that the executive session is necessary for the protection of the public interest. Is there any discussion? Okay. The pending motion is to go into executive session for the purpose of discussing city administrator appointment and pending contract, and for the further reason that the executive session is necessary for the protection of the public interest. Okay, cast your vote.
Motion fails 2-6.
Councilman Jensen.
I just want to congratulate.
Councilman Yerger, you're on.
I just want to congratulate Jody on her nomination. I was part of the mayor's committee. We sat in on the final with the interview with the final applicants. I was happy the mayor chose a good candidate with hometown roots. Somebody that'll work with Fremont's best interest in heart. Looking forward to seeing how you help us move Fremont forward as we begin a new chapter in city administration.
Councilman Vaughn,
Echo all those same positive sentiments and would make a motion to approve.
Councilwoman Ganem,
I also echo those sentiments. She's very knowledgeable, dedicated, caring, and committed to Fremont and committed to improving this city for all of us. And so congratulations, Jody, and I second.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 6-0 with 2 abstentions.
Next item is 24, move to authorize the mayor to sign the employment contract for Jody Sanders as city administrator. Councilman Gibson,
I would like to make that motion.
Councilman Vaughn,
I would second.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 6-1 with 1 abstention, Mayor.
Congratulations, Jody. Well, thank you. All right, Councilman Jensen,
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
Councilman Vaughn,
Oh, second.
cast your votes.
Councilmember Yerger, I did not get your vote. Thank you. The motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
We are adjourned. Have a good night, everyone.